Morning, everybody. I think we'll come to order. We have a full agenda today. First item on the agenda, we'll vote on approve the draft October 10th, 2017 board minutes posted on our website. Will anybody move to approve the minutes? Is there a second? Any comments or additions, deletions? Okay, hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Very good. Motion carries. Minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda is the CHS response on the Board of Correction ESH adult and young adult reports. This next item on the agenda is the Correctional Health Service response to the Board of Corrections ESH adult and young adult reports. CHS, if you would now make your presentation.
Good morning. So we appreciate the report and particularly the feedback on CHS involvement in the ESH units. I think our overall assertion today is that the processes that we've set in place are working to provide adequate care to the patients in this setting. In particular, we wanted to point out that we do have written policy that guides CHS's process for reviewing patients who are proposed to be placed in ESH for what we would consider to be contraindications to placement in that location. That policy guides the leadership staff who conduct these reviews to look for a variety of conditions, both medical and mental health, which we believe cannot be adequately managed in those settings. So on the medical side, that would include things like medications that require directly observed therapy, including regular basal insulin, including medications like blood thinners that require daily administration from a nurse. On the mental health side, that would include things like active recent suicidality. Of course, serious mental illness is a contraindication, and developmental delay. We feel strongly that this process can be achieved by review of the medical records, and we feel that that's an important way of achieving the goal, which is to protect patients who should not be there from being in that location, with as much as possible minimizing the complexities of this process for CHS. So we are very cognizant of our mission as a clinical care service, and this task is outside the bounds of clinical care, and it's important for us to insulate our frontline staff from that task as much as possible, because there could be a perception that we are not acting in the best interests of our patients in this arrangement. So we believe that the way we do it is working, that we have clear policy guidance, and that we have minimized any pathology that should not be housed in that location. We also appreciate the feedback about the high rates of substance use disorders, which is a characteristic of the jail population across the board, and is also true in ESH housing. And we are undergoing reorganization and expansion of our substance use disorder treatment service, which will include much more outreach, and that outreach for specific visits around harm reduction that will be tailored to individual substances that our patients use, and the degree of pathology will benefit patients in this setting as well. So I think with that, we'll take any questions that you might have.
Anyone have any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, go on.
If during your evaluation of a person prior to their commitment to ESH, you find that they've had some PTSD experiences, or that they tell your mental health staff that as a child they were restrained by their parents, and that they are, and that they have a bad reaction to being restrained, to being shackled to a fixed object, would that affect your decision to allow them to be in ESH? And other than SMI, have there been any mental health reasons that you've said that ESH was not the appropriate housing?
Yeah, so I'll let Elizabeth expand, but part of the reason that we want leadership staff to be doing these reviews is because we want to capture whatever complexity and nuance, and we've worked to broaden our understanding of PTSD, and particularly to include it in our SMI definition. So certainly information like that would be a reason, contraindication, as I mentioned, but I'll let Elizabeth add anything she wants.
Thanks. Morning. Right, so as Ross said, PTSD is now considered a serious mental illness in our system, which is a relatively new change for us, so that would be an exclusionary criteria. There are, in the reviews of the charts for clearance to ESH, if there's documentation that a patient has had a significantly traumatic experience being restrained in any kind of setting, whether it's a history of punitive segregation or shackles, we take that into consideration. Those would be usually case conference with myself or one of my direct reports about the clearance process. And as Ross mentioned, it is extremely important for us that we keep the line staff away from this evaluation, because not only is the potential there for patients to interpret our actions as other than in their best interest, that happens fairly frequently. And there was another part to your question that I may not have addressed.
Has this process resulted in people being denied? Other than SMI, have you recommended that someone not be housed in ESH?
There have been individual situations from a mental health perspective, where the particular unique circumstances of that patient have led to a denial of clearance. Yeah.
How many?
No, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but not many.
So the example that Dr. Cohen gave to your colleague about a child who complains about his history, that would create a barrier to entry there?
Oh, yes.
So if an individual has reported symptoms of trauma that have then led to a mental illness related to that, then yes, that would be an exclusionary criteria. If the documentation is of punishment as a child, we would have, and without an accompanying mental illness, we'd have to look into that a little more closely.
I just have one more question, Elizabeth.
Sure.
Speaking to the issue of cognitive disabilities or delays, based on a review of the medical records, how would you identify people who shouldn't be placed because for that reason?
Right.
It's my understanding not everyone is getting currently assessed for that.
So that's a fair understanding. There are those who are diagnosed. There are formal diagnostic codes for intellectual impairment and disability. If that code is in the record, that will be an exclusion automatically. We have started to implement a screen for 16 to 18-year-olds that includes information specifically related to trauma, intellectual impairment, new episode psychosis, substance use for all 16 to 18-year-olds, regardless of whether they're on the mental health service. The plan is to expand that to all 16 to 21-year-olds. And once we are much better able to identify that population, and then it's documented in the record, they will be excluded from ESH.
Do you know the timeline for expansion?
So that's a good question. We're waiting for a few more staff to start. The hope is that within the next 6 months, we'll be able to have the screen for every 16 to 21-year-old who comes in. Mental health is not involved in that decision.
Is mental health involved in those decisions, the true, shoe, and the secure unit?
They are involved in it to some degree with the true unit. I'd have to check on secure.
Anyone else?
Sure, on which units? The true units and the secure? Yes, so mental health rounds there, and they're involved in treatment team meetings, and they see individuals who are getting mental health treatment there pretty frequently.
Anyone else? Thanks very much. Appreciate it. Next, we'll have an update from the death review panel.
I'll be brief. We discussed at our September public meeting that the board's review of deaths in custody has led to critical systemic reforms in the city's jail system since 1970. We internally have conducted a review of our death review process so that the committee and the board will restart its investigative process with a significantly strengthened capacity to study these deaths and then also to make recommendations to prevent deaths in the future. As part of the process, the death review panel will report to the board and the public whenever a death in custody occurs. So since our October meeting, there has been one death. As reported also in the news, Selman Feratovic died on October 19th, 2017 at the age of 28. And this is the 6th death of a person in DOC custody since 2017 began.
Thank you, Martha. The next item is the updates on the Restrictive Housing Rulemaking Committee. Judge Hamill?
Good morning, everyone. As part of Good morning, everyone. As part of the board's ongoing rulemaking efforts, the Restrictive Housing Rulemaking Committee and board staff held fact-finding discussions with 11 experts in July, September, and October, and with COBA in November. These experts included leading academics, psychiatrists, and corrections consultants and officials across the country. One moment. Across the country. Many of them spoke to the conditions of young adult enhanced supervision, namely the use of restraint desks, the level systems, and the presence of dogs, since that appears to be one of the most troubling aspects of restrictive housing at this time. We spoke with some law professors that recommended the board consider adopting the American Bar Association criminal justice standards on the treatment of prisoners. They state that correctional authorities should not use restraint mechanisms such as handcuffs, leg irons, straitjackets, restraint chairs, and spit masks as a form of punishment or retaliation. Subject to the remainder of this standard, restraint should not be used except to control a prisoner who presents an immediate risk of self-injury or injury to others, to prevent serious property damage, for health care support purposes, and when necessary as a security precaution during transport or transfer. The ABA standards go on to say when restraints are necessary, correctional authorities should use the least restrictive form of restraints that are appropriate and shall be used only for as long as the need exists, not for a predetermined period of time. We also spoke with a former captain of the Department of Correction who worked there for a few decades. He's correctional and forensic psychologist. He has his PhD in psychology. And he specifically said that restraint desks should not be used except with extremely violent inmates who have failed to change their behavior after DOC has made serious attempts to change their behavior through engagement in meaningful programs and after psychotherapeutic interventions by mental health staff have failed. In that event, an interdisciplinary team should examine each case individually to determine when and for how long the restraint desk should be utilized on an individual while a restraint desk is being used. the Department of Correction and Mental Health staff should come up with an individualized plan for when the person should be released. We also spoke with medical experts who told us that restraints are designed and should only be used to address an immediate safety security threat posed by people who are out of control and only because other less restrictive options have been tried and failed. We were also told that restraint should only be used until the person calms down and for no longer than the person is actually posing a threat to himself or others. We heard from psychiatric experts and medical experts who told us that restraining people to death is much more likely to make them much more angry and much more violent when they are, in fact, in the restraints and when they're released therefrom. We spoke with correctional experts, the one in Colorado, who spoke specifically to the idea of dogs. There are dogs that have been stationed in the young adult enhanced supervision units, and spoke specifically to the place that there's absolutely no place for dogs in classrooms. We spoke with legal and policy experts that are experts in youth and young adult that are based in Washington, D.C. and do national work. We were informed by that group that restraint deaths would engender a great deal of rage in young adults who would view it as being chained up like animals. He couldn't think of any valid correctional reason that would justify the placement of young people in restraint deaths for up to 7 hours a day, much less for 30 days. Thought the practice negates the principle that restraint should only be used in the event of an immediate threat and only for the shortest period possible. In fact, he opined that the current operation of young adult enhanced supervision and assessment would appear to be a violation of civil rights. We also spoke to the Washington state officials who the Department of Correction will often rely upon when discussing the young adult enhanced supervision and enhanced supervision in any case and restraints. And they told us that their use of restraints is quite distinguishable than the way the Department of Correction is using them, that they only use them in maximum custody, and they utilize the restraint desk when someone's coming out of solitary confinement to allow congregate programming for 1.5 hours per day. And the maximum custody unit is reserved for the very violent, and these are convicted prisoners. They've already been convicted of a crime. He thought that chaining people for this period of time, young people in particular, would engender a great deal of anger and violence and would certainly not recommend this practice. It has become clear, and I'm going to touch on the young adult variants, which will come up just because it's tied to what these experts have been telling us. It has become clear through our rulemaking meetings that there is no national expert that finds that the young adult enhanced supervision entry unit is consistent with sound correctional and psychological principles. Based upon its operation, various assessments, and further investigation, I also agree with the DC people that this unit appears to violate the civil rights of young people. Civil rights generally, the basic rights that we have to be free from unequal treatment, disparate treatment, based on certain characteristics such as that we as a society have deemed important, like race, gender, age, religion, and national origin. The critical facts with respect to the young adult enhanced supervision unit is that, and the entry unit in particular, is that it is only created for young adult who are males aged 18 to 21, and they're placed in this unit for 30 days, a specific time limit. They are permitted to be locked out for only 7 hours at one long stretch, but they must agree to be restrained by both legs the entire time. Other than the very hourly breaks they're supposed to be provided, I do want to note that it is virtually impossible, at least up to the information that I have, for the Department of Correction to comply with their own restraint policy, which is that they shall not be restrained for more than 4 hours at any one time, as well as for the Board of Corrections standards, which mandate 7 hours out of cell because they are locked out for one stretch of time. The assessment that's being conducted in this unit is only conducted by corrections. It is not conducted by mental health staff. They remain in the unit for 30 days regardless of progress with programming, which is now quite limited. If the youth fail to participate in the assessment, attempts are made to engage them, and restraints continue regardless of cooperation and progress that are made. Dogs have been housed in these units. They're stationed in the units, intimidating the restrained, incarcerated young adults. This age group of incarcerated persons, that's 18 to 21-year-olds and males, and these are primarily young people who come from communities of color, are the only incarcerated persons in city corrections that are subjected to this assessment unit, and such an assessment in such a unit where they are locked out for only 7 hours, fully restrained for 30 days. And the assessment is not only used for the initial housing placement. Thereafter, the assessment is only used for the one initial housing placement thereafter. It doesn't even follow the youth through their incarceration, and it is not being used to create individually based programming to address the root causes of violence or their particular circumstances. And in fact, after the assessment unit, then the level 1, level 4 housing options for enhanced supervision is available to them as it is available to all the other incarcerated inmates. Accordingly, it would appear to me that law enforcement, that being corrections, their policy and practice that's contained within the young adult enhanced supervision causes disparate treatment and disparate impact on the young males 18 to 20 of color who are in city corrections and should be eliminated. This is my presentation with respect to an update on the rulemaking, and I also included how it's relevant in particular for the young adult variances that will be coming before us.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Next, we will have the public comment on the variance requests. The board today has 3 variance votes scheduled: enhanced supervision for young adults, secure unit, and a change in the visit schedule for Thanksgiving Day. We will begin the public comment now. We ask the speakers limit their public comments during this period to the variance requests themselves, and please limit your comments to 4 minutes. We will have an additional comment period at the end of the meeting to address other matters. The iPad on the stage will tell you how much time you have left, and probably so will I. First speaker is Jennifer Parrish.
Excuse me. Good morning. My name is Jennifer Parrish. I work at the Urban Justice Center Mental Health Project, and I'm a member of the Jails Action Coalition. I urged you to reject these variances when DOC initially requested them, and each time they came up for renewal. I do so again today for the reason so powerfully and comprehensively expressed in the letters from the Legal Aid Society and Children's Rights. It's time to end this failed experiment. I ask that the remainder of my time be given to Alex Abel, who will read a statement from a young man who is living in ESH as we meet here today. It is his words that you need to hear in full. Thank you.
I am currently incarcerated in ESH at OBCC. I turned 21 almost 4 months ago. I've been in ESH since January. I hope that the board will vote against keeping people under 22 years old in ESH. The most frustrating part of being here is not being able to transfer back to population. Being on this unit should not be permanent. There should be ways to get back to general population. I am now on level 2 after 11 months in ESH in a unit where people who are older than I am, some of them in their 30s or 40s. I haven't had any fights on the unit or been involved in any violence, but I wasn't moved to the next level for 10 months because of arguing with an officer or refusing little stuff like staying in the yard or the shower for too long. If you have any write-ups, you can't level up. If you have an argument with an officer, you can't level up. They do a 45-day review, but there's no hearing. They just tell you the results, and there's no appeal. In ESH, there is no freedom. I spend most of my time in my cell. The cell that I'm in has a solid door with a window and a slot where the CO slides in a food tray when we have meals. We eat in our cells alone. When I was in level 1, every time I left my cell, I was strip searched. I went to a restraint desk where my feet were shackled. I sat there watching TV or filling out a workbook. While in the restraint desk, I was not asked about going back to my cell or using the bathroom. I could ask, but it took about 15 to 30 minutes for an officer to respond. I earned my GED while in ESH. I took classes in the spring. The classes happen in the same space as lockout. You have to be focused because it can be loud during class. Some people come out just to talk. Now that I'm in level 2, I still have to be in a restraint desk to participate in school. In school, you can't drink water or use the bathroom. You're stuck in a desk the whole time. Sometimes I think about quitting school just because of the hassle. There's always a problem when it's time for me to go to school. Escorts take too long to get there, or they say it's too late for me to go. Since it's in a restraint desk, they will say there's not enough space because there aren't enough chairs for everyone. For example, I didn't get to go to school all last week because they said there wasn't enough space. The CEOs can be discouraging about going to school. They say things like, "Why do you want to go to school? You weren't going when you were home. Why do you want to go now?" Going to school gives me something to do. It gives me something to look forward to. I now have my GED, but I want to go to college when I go home, so I keep studying. I shouldn't be forced to sit in a restraint desk just to go to school. Mental health comes to the housing area every 21 days. When I was in level 1, they saw me at the desk or in the cell. Now they usually come to the front of my cell to speak to me. Every now and then, they'll see me while I'm locked out, but I don't have enough time with a therapist. They just come once a month and talk to me briefly. I want to have sessions where I can talk to them privately and express my concerns. When I was in level 1, some officers talked to us disrespectfully because they knew we couldn't get out of the chairs. It is stressful to sit in a chair all day. Sometimes they put the leg irons on too tight. They would loosen them if I asked, but that's not what everyone does. I get stressed out and frustrated being chained up this way. Lockout hours are from 5 in the morning to noon every day, and then the following day, lockouts from 1 to 8. We aren't usually allowed out of our cells at 5 a.m. They'll say the captain isn't there or that ESU isn't there. Usually it's 8 or 9 by the time we are actually locked out. Then we go back in our cells at 12. There are 2 to 3 lockdowns per week. The lockdowns last a day or two depending on the incident. During lockdowns, we aren't allowed out of our cells at all, not even for showers or rec. I get to be outside for rec, but when I was in level 1, I was in a cage alone even then. There's no workout equipment there. I usually just did push-ups. Now in level 2, I have rec with other people and we can play basketball or work out with equipment. I receive a few visits each month, but they happen in another type of cage, a visit booth. I have booth visits because I'm in ESH. I don't like seeing people through glass. It's hard to hear and the glass is scratched up. When the visit hours are 8 to 2, they won't tell you have a visit hour until 1. Then your family has left because it's taken too long. If you're locked in, they won't even tell you have a visitor. When that happens, my mom or my girlfriend sit and wait for hours and then end up leaving. The board should make DOC find another alternative to ESH. The only thing different about ESH level 1 in the box
I think you're 5
is the
minutes
7.
has elapsed, sir.
I thought I had both. I have like 2 sentences. Rec, phone, and meals are the same as being in the box. You are isolated, and during lockout, you're in the chairs, which is stressful and frustrating. The whole environment just causes frustration and stress. It makes you even angrier and doesn't help you progress in a positive way. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Alex Abel.
That's me.
That is you.
All right, so since you called my name, let me just say one quick thing, which is that I know this is a symbolic thing, you know,
Yes,
wearing
it
the
is.
orange and the chains. I understand, but that's for a reason. That's because there's nobody here who's actually incarcerated at the ESH participating in this discussion. So it's not, even though I've never been incarcerated before, and this is it is symbolic, it still has had an impact on me. And I think that a wise and judicial, a just process of decision-making might involve something like, people who are making decisions wearing chains, if you haven't already, for a little bit of time and just seeing how it makes you feel, because that's what this is about. It's not about, is this better than solitary or not, which I think is how the conversation is framed. It's about, are people allowed to retain their dignity, and does this make the jail safer? And I think that wearing chains and including the people who are actually incarcerated will help you make that decision better. Thank you.
Kelsey Diavalet.
Good morning. Thank you, Alex, for speaking. My name is Kelsey Diavin. I work at Brooklyn Defender Services, and I'm just going to be commenting on ESH and the use of restraint desks in ESH and Secure. BDS strongly opposes the department's continued use of enhanced supervision housing for young adults, and we oppose the use of restraint desks in ESH and Secure. BDS encourages the board to deny the department's request and instead move forward with rulemaking on restrictive housing units. At the time of ESH's creation, the board recognized the harms posed by isolation of young people aged 18 to 21 and strictly excluded young people from these units. Yet the department repeatedly uses the process of variance requests to continue the humiliating and punitive treatment of young people. Rather than moving towards compliance, DOC has just expanded the use of isolation for young people. We believe these units are overly punitive in design and character, and as a result are counterproductive in their purported aims to reduce violence. One particular example is the practice of restraining young people to desks during their out-of-cell time. It is disturbing and apparently inappropriate practice in facilities predominantly housing people who have yet to be convicted of any crime. Despite the department's claim that placements in ESH and Secure units are non-punitive, the policies that govern these units will almost certainly be perceived to the contrary. The punitive tone is set from the very beginning, during 30-day assessment period, throughout which young people in the ESH entry unit are subjected to the most severe restraints as a matter of course. In a jail setting where a young person is observed by correctional staff around the clock and healthcare staff daily, there is no reasonable justification for chaining a young person to a chair for a month to determine the least restrictive setting and restraints necessary to maintain safety. The least restrictive setting is, by definition, established on an individual basis. Uniformly applying severe and humiliating restraints to everyone can therefore only be understood as a punitive measure. It should come as no surprise that many young people choose to remain in their cells rather than be subjected to the humiliation of being chained to a desk for hours each day. As a result, however, these young people find themselves exposed to the devastation of solitary confinement, precisely the harm from which the board sought to protect their developing minds when it adopted rules barring placement in punitive segregation and ESH. Further exacerbating the social isolation, the vast majority of young people are deprived contact visits, while in restrictive setting. When our young clients are deprived of supportive contact visits with family, they uniformly become increasingly despondent. Taken together, a predictable outcome of humiliating restraints and social isolation is a climate of frustration, resentment, anger, and embarrassment, precisely what can contribute to violence. As such, we consider such punitive measures to be counterproductive, harmful to the individual in question, and threatening the safety of other people in jail, as well as the communities to which these young people will ultimately return. Since the board adopted measures to reform the use of isolation in our city's jails, DOC continuously states that they cannot comply with the minimum standards set forth by the board. They've had more than a year to get up to speed, and yet young people continue to languish in isolation and suffer the direct harm the board so vehemently opposed at the beginning. This delay is inexcusable, and we urge the board to deny DOC's variance requests. Thank you.
Next speaker is Ginger Lopez.
Good morning. My name is Ginger Lopez. I'm a paralegal with the Prisoners' Rights Project of the Legal Aid Society. Over the past year, fellow paralegal Lizzie Willison, several law students, and I have interviewed over 70 people incarcerated in enhanced supervision housing, ESH. Consistently, the people we've interviewed have described a dehumanizing, punitive, seemingly arbitrary program. It is clear from their experiences that ESH is absolutely not therapeutic. It is dangerous and it is harming the people subjected to it. The reality is ESH is currently a debilitating, violent failure for all ages. Changes must be made now, even as you consider rulemaking to improve the conditions for everyone in restrictive housing. I would like to read some excerpts of statements about current conditions in ESH from some of the people we've interviewed. The clients quoted today are all over 21 years of age, except for one who is 20. We believe that it is important that you hear their words and remember that these are people who require the board to maintain appropriate standards in our jails. Their fate is in your hands. Many of our clients complain about the ESH lockout schedule. Excerpt 1. In phase 1, the Department of Corrections required the emergency service unit to lock us in and out of our cells. Lockouts often occurred late, but we were always locked in on time. That meant that often we were locked out of our cells for less than the time required, 7 hours. The lockout time is supposed to alternate day to day between the two tiers. During the lockout time, the correction officers bring us out of our cells one by one to lock us into the restraint desk. This process can take up to 1 or 2 hours of your allotted lockout time. The officers will also just skip people to get somebody else out first. People will have to yell, kick, and scream to get out of their cells. This is incredibly stressful for everyone. Our daily lockout time is often cut shorter because of the fact that ESH gets locked down at least 3 to 4 days per week. Lockout time is frequently up to an hour and a half late. The other day we were supposed to lock out at 1 p.m., but we were locked out at 4:30 p.m. for no reason. Our clients often complain about the lack of legitimate due process in the review process. Excerpt 2. After my first 45 days in phase 1, I received my first review. I passed a review as I had participated in programming and had not received any disciplinary infractions, but was not moved out of the unit. I submitted a grievance, and the grievance officer told me they did not know why I had been transferred. Soon after that, the grievance officer was transferred out of the facility. Correction staff came to my cell and threatened me, saying, "Keep grieving, you'll stay here another 45 days. I have been completing the program books in my cell, but program staff tell me it does not count. I have basically given up on programming in phase 2 because I am not learning any marketable skills from the programming, and I know that it will not affect my ability to move up to phase 3. I do not think I will ever get to phase 3, and the captain tells me so. I have heard of people move back from phase 3 to phase 2 for small things. I believe that I have absolutely no hope of advancing. I was placed into phase 2 of ESH upon my arrival in July 2016 and have been at this phase ever since. The 45-day review comes, but staff appear to pick and choose who they will allow to progress. At one point, everyone in the unit was participating in programming, but once they saw that even if they participated, they would not progress, most gave up participating. I heard rumors I would receive a 45-day review. Instead, on my 31st day in ESH, I was informed that this was the first day of my 45-day review period, and I would have a review in 45 days. So this was actually a 76-day review period. After this review period, I was informed that I would still continue to be in ESH phase 1. The outcomes of all of our review hearings seem completely unfair and baseless. We programmed in the restraint desk. I always participated in programming because I did not want to give up an excuse to keep me in phase 1. I earned 4 separate certificates. However, I did not advance for 9 months. I failed to advance because I had been written up in the logbook for smoking and covering up my window. I have never had a jury urine test, and I do not smoke because of my severe asthma. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lizzie Wallazan. I'm a paralegal with the Prisoners' Rights Project of the Legal Aid Society. In addition to the complaints shared by Ms. Lopez, I would like to share excerpts from our clients' statements about their dignity, safety, shackling, and other extreme measures in the unit, such as use of canine and ESU. At the end, I'll share recommendations made by our clients that demonstrate their understanding of their plight and provide some logical solutions to that should be considered by the board. Our clients are shackled to restraint desks, ostensibly for their own safety. However, in addition to feeling robbed of their agency and humanity, individuals report feeling vulnerable to attack, and individuals have urinated on themselves because staff did not let them go to the bathroom. I quote, "The use of restraint desks makes ESH unsafe. In a recent incident where an individual was cut by others while he was shackled in the desk restraint chair, he was not able to get away or defend himself. The SU captain had left the floor. The restraint chairs are also dangerous because officers drop keys. Individuals are able to get handcuff keys. Officers have failed to lock certain people into the chairs properly. In one unit, there were 5 occasions when an officer dropped his keys. Afterwards, the officers didn't want to take responsibility for it." Quote, "While in restraint desks, the correctional officers don't respond very quickly when we request something. I've seen a few inmates waiting for the restroom a long time and then urinating on the floor instead. We're shackled all the time, even just when going to the shower. Everything that happens in ESH is making us worse. Being in ESH is a black hole. Once you receive the status, you just don't leave from it, no matter what. I was transferred to ESH from the residential housing unit, RHU. Mentally, phase 1 is disturbing because you're chained all the time. DOC wants you to do wrong. They're teaching us that wrong is right. Our clients also report that correctional staff rely heavily on militarized units like probe team or emergency service unit and the K-9 unit to respond to conflict. Quote, "In phase 1, DOC required the emergency service unit to lock us in and out of our cells. We were searched every time we entered and left our cells. We were searched before showers. I was often left in the showers waiting for an officer to search me for hours. The only thing that officers respected was violence, and they were constantly spraying chemical agents in response to incidents, however minor. I have severe asthma, and I was constantly catching asthma attacks in response to the spray." Quote, "Tasers are used every once in a while for disobeying orders. I witnessed a prisoner being tased in May 2017, and he was left on the floor of the unit for approximately 10 minutes until medical staff was called." Quote, "In ESH, the correctional officers get into physical and verbal altercations with individuals all day. Minor incidents will happen, and officers will escalate the situations unnecessarily." Quote, "I've participated in school every day it was available because I really want to finish. This was difficult after I was attacked in a restraint desk. I have trouble focusing in the classroom because I'm worried I'll be injured again. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder. I'm also distracted by the loud barking of the dogs from the ESU K-9 unit who are present in the classroom. The dogs are kept about 15 feet away from where we are in the restraint desks." Quote, "And the people we've interviewed, our clients, have provided us with realistic recommendations for improving ESH. I'm going to share a few of them. Quote, I recommend that there be inmate council meetings so we can discuss our grievances and be heard by decision makers. I would like more escorts so that program and recreation run as designed. Better programming that teaches us real job skills or the opportunity to earn college credit would be really motivating for me. I believe that giving the individuals who are in ESH the same privileges as those in general population would help. Also, if a prisoner does all that is required of him to move to the next phase, then he should be moved. The inconsistency, favoritism, and blatant disregard for our overall mental health makes us feel completely helpless. I have a couple more. I recommend that DOC plan a family day for us. We need real incentives in general that are delivered when we behave well. Allowing us to touch our families when they come to visit would help deter alleged bad behavior significantly. The disconnect we feel from others from the outside world keeps us angry and sad." Last one, I quote, "The phase 1 restraint chairs are too dangerous. The booth visitation restriction has got to stop. We need to be able to hug our families." Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Charlotte Pope.
My name is Charlotte Pope. I'm with the Children's Defense Fund New York. We also ask that you deny these requests, and we have a few questions. To first address secure, the variance request states that restraint desks are only utilized when security concerns deem their use necessary and when supported by tangible evidence. We would appreciate additional information on how security concerns or tangible evidence are being defined and what exactly leads to or can lead to the use of restraint desks in school. We ask that the board require the department to provide the most recent policies and directives of secure and all other restrictive settings, and that those policies prevent against long-term or indefinite stays in those settings. We also notice that the department has acknowledged that the physical space of secure is not optimal, and we would like to know how the department intends to remedy this as they plan to move forward with restrictive housing rulemaking. To address ESH, the variance request states program participation is a key indicator in assessing a young adult's engagement. We would like to know what exactly the program participation indicator includes, especially how or whether it takes into consideration the impact of restraints on participation. According to the board report on young adult ESH and testimony today, people in levels 2 through 4 continue to be restrained in desks while attending school in the entry unit, even as they are not otherwise being restrained during lockout time. This practice confuses the act of attending school with being punished. We would like to know about what efforts, if any, are being made to end the use of restraints in schooling for all of ESH. The department's variance notes that in 2017, the average program participation rate within the entry unit was 82%. However, this statistic, which is not defined, misses the other ESH levels, and the board report notes that participation in programming appears to be higher in the entry unit compared to the ESH blended units, and programming is subject to frequent disruptions and intimidation. Given that program participation is referred to as an indicator in assessing a young adult's engagement, and that most are only able to leave ESH due to discharge from department custody, we ask that the board require the department to report on clear criteria for movement and ensure that the created criteria prevent against long-term and indefinite stay. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you think this is... There's a name here which is illegible and appears to be crossed out. I don't want to exclude anyone so if that's you and you still want to speak, please come forward. Okay, thank you. Okay, now we'll start with dealing with the specific variances. On July 12, 2016, the board first granted variances for minimum standards 1-05B and 1-08F to allow the department to house 19 to 21-year-olds in ESH housing. In October 2016, the board granted a variance to allow the department to house 18-year-olds in ESH. The board last renewed these variances on July 11, 2017, and these variances are due to expire on November 15th, which is tomorrow. The department has now asked the board to consider a 6-month renewal of the variance, allowing for the placement of 18 to 21-year-olds in ESH. They've additionally requested that the board amend the minimum standards to incorporate this variance permanently. The department explains that ESH is now narrowly designed to address the specific needs of the most violent and most problematic young adults in Department of Correction custody. We will vote on this variance request here today and review the minimum standards in our ongoing restrictive housing rulemaking process. We can start with the department if you would please present your variance request.
Thank you. I think we are requesting a variance to include young adults in the placement of ESH as a, if appropriate, a small presentation on that need. We have tried to work through developing alternatives for dealing with our most problematic and violent. We are certainly aware that ESH and the programs within it require constant review and improvement. We are committed to doing so. We're working to improve specific portions of ESH, particularly as it relates to, as have been noted in public comments and by the board, programs, training for the staff, monitoring and accountability of the offering of those services, lockout times, And so we understand that ESH is a work in progress, and that's why we continue to ask for both variances to give us time to continue to work on these issues, but also consideration for rulemaking, because we do believe that there has been impact in addressing and focusing attention on this small population. For context, there are roughly just under 1,000 young adults per day within the facilities. Only 25 are in young adults are in ESH at this point, and only 10 are subject to placement in restraint program desks. And the adjudications for those individuals adhere to particularly strict criteria in terms of slashings and stabbings and serious assaults on either staff or inmates that result in serious injury. In further context, there are roughly about 4,600 admissions that have occurred since January of young adults, and only 83 of those people have been subject to placement in ESH. Of those 83, we know that there has been movement into level 2, so progression out of the most restrictive form of ESH. And overall, what we have been trying to do with the young adult population in focusing on programming in GMDC and ESH has resulted in benefits to a reduction in violence. We do note that obviously we've identified a very small population for which there is a history of violence, and the criteria for entering into ESH were as a result of very serious injuries. But overall, between FY15 and FY17, within the young adult population, 18 to 21, we have put into place many other programs as well to promote the progression of young adults out of the system. In that same time, use of force with serious injuries within that category are down 46%. Use of force with minor injuries are down 19%. Assaults on staff with serious injuries are down 55%. Assaults on staff with minor injuries are down 45%. A totality of assaults on staff are down 23% within that young adult population in total. So wanted to put that in context in that many of the efforts that we are putting on, we spend a lot of time focusing in on a very small population that are adjudicated for very violent measures, but the department should at least, and the work of the men and women in the department should be at least recognized on what they are trying to do with both the adolescents and the young adults. And violence has gone down both in the adolescents and the young adults, areas that we've placed particular amount of focus. So with that being said, we continue to feel that while, as people have said, the ESH is an effort by the department to engage, and we commit to that engagement with inmates who have the most violent and persistent problematic issues. We want to do that in a safe and secure manner, and that is why we have set up a progression level within ESH. We do commit to making several changes, and that's what we've brought to the board before. We do understand that we need to optimize software and other technology for actually tracking young adults through program and service offerings. So we hope to have a solution in place and can report out on it in 2 months at the next, before the hearing, but by the next hearing, to kind of give you an update on exactly where that is in terms of actually tracking movement into program participation across, not just kind of level 1 across the entire ESH. We are working right now and can update the board in 2 months in terms of tracking and auditing lockout periods across the ESH spectrum. We are doing a comp, and we are developing, and should in 2 weeks to 30 days, depending, finalize a comprehensive schedule within ESH to kind of track kind of program offerings so that it will be posted in every unit. The board can get a copy of that comprehensive schedule. We have already taken efforts. We've removed canines from placement within ESH, noting how disruptive they can be for programming. We also are working right now with the SCOC to figure out alternatives to place one additional rec time indoors, so that while we commit to moving forward not just 1 hour of offered rec, we'll try to make 2 hours of offered rec indoor and outdoor. It will require some movement with the SCOC to identify the space and construct the space. We have to figure out what the options are for doing that inside. And then we are working diligently with DOE to try to figure out how we can offer education for those in level 2 and above. That would require a partnership with DOE as well as a partnership with SCOC to identify the space that meets the needs of the DOE. And so we're engaged in those conversations now. We are working to expand the programming for all young adults across, not just in entry. We had actually, as noted, significantly higher levels of participation. We need to move that towards kind of the other units, and so we're working on developing that. Winnette can talk about that soon. We have already offered 32 hours of training for each of the ESH officers, but a significant difference between secure and ESH has been kind of the application of the dialectical behavior DBT training, and so we'll add that into ESH staffing. And we are moving towards, within the next 30 days, eliminating the entry unit itself and kind of focusing on just the levels of ESH 1 through 4. We are trying to work on and DC Saunders can speak to this, a survey for the young adults in ESH and others who have touched ESH on programming needs. So we, while implementing programming that we had available, we'll then try to incorporate kind of their input to develop future programming that we'll have to either contract out or develop on our own. And then we are working to take a look at separate areas where maybe if we can minimize the amount of, we would like to build a 2-tier track on ESH, one that is focused on young adults 18 to 21, and another that actually is focused on the adults. That again requires a bit more work in collaborating with the SCOC in not just finding the space, designing the space, and then getting their input on how to appropriately build out that space. So bottom line with all of those things, we are asking the variance for this variance because we do continue to believe that there needs to be an area that focuses on those that are adjudicated for the most violent incidents. We do still want to remain committed to engaging those inmates for those that choose to engage and to offer up progression. We understand that this is something that we need to put our efforts on. We have put together a team to start focusing on some of these alternatives and aggressively push toward them. By the next board meeting, we can have an outline of where we stand on some of these moves. Again, I cannot say for some of these issues specific timelines because they do require engagement with outside entities like the SCOC and like DOE, but we commit to getting as many of the answers as we can to that. And we request the 6-month because that's exactly what we think. We need the time to develop some of these and engage in the conversations. We know that for several of these issues, beyond the approval for designs, actual construction will take time. So those are efforts within this variance for the ESH.
Thank you. We'll need a formal motion first and then a second, and then we can get into a discussion. Is there a motion? The motion is just to consider this variances. Second? Thank you. So here, okay, we've done that. So now I'll open the floor up to debate, and I also open it on the department's proposal, and also if any other member of the board would want to propose a variance. So is there any questions or comments? We can get into the substance of that. Mr. Reagan.
Just procedurally, Jeff, in July,
Oh, Dr. Cohen.
in July you were asked to provide a response. You were to provide a response to the board ESH report. You told Barrett Andrews to you would prepare a response. You said you had it in September. It's November. We haven't received it.
I believe I gave a response last month.
Have you written a response to
I stood up here and gave a response. I'm sorry.
I think we were asking for a written response. I thought we were still waiting for that.
Well, we'll nail that down and if we have not gotten an adequate response, we certainly would like to get something in writing. But we'll, yeah. Mr. Reagan.
No one up here likes this. No one up here likes the restraint desks. Judge, I listened carefully to what you said this morning. No one likes this stuff. But some of us have voted repeatedly for this. Some of us believe this is about safety. There are really good examples of conditions that Dr. Cohen and others have suggested here. But I just wanted you to address one of the comments from the Brooklyn Legal Aid folks who, questioned the processes of appeal. Do you have any data or metrics to speak to that issue? Do you understand what I'm talking about, Jeff?
Yeah.
This idea is offensive to us that one person could say you're going to be stuck here for 45 days. We've always talked about due process and fairness here. Could you address that, please?
Sure. 3 separate points. One, just to remind, each individual who is placed in ESH is adjudicated. We are working to expand the multidisciplinary team insofar as people who are participate in it. We have tried to move beyond just simply uniform, so programmatic staff are involved. We have asked other agencies to be involved. Some have not wanted to be involved in that effort. So insofar as we can, we commit to building a multidisciplinary team that reviews these people. We are looking to lower the time and reduce the time for which we do those assessments. Particularly for young adults, that could happen within 14 days, and maybe for the entire, for 30. We're looking into that right now, particularly as we try to reevaluate what the multidisciplinary team can be.
Yeah,
so,
if you could pull that apart.
Yep, and I'll just say,
this is inmate, or this is unconvicted person, Joseph, and say, he's been in there that long, he's been in there, his appeal to go to level 2 was turned down. Do you understand what I'm saying?
yeah. I mean, again, I don't have the specifics, so
No, I
I will
understand.
get that. As just a numbers, 83 young adults were placed in ESH between January and October, the end of October, and 41 spent time in ESH level 2, had progressed up to level 2 or back, so individuals. But again, that doesn't tell the entire story. That's just the numbers. I think we have to take a look at that, and I can take a look at some of the progression issues.
And then the other issue that I spoke to you about on the phone the other day was, we get these reports. You don't seem to be adding anyone to restraint desks. Is that correct?
Adding anyone to restraint?
You have to report to us when you...
Yes.
The secure.
Oh, for secure, yes. For secure, we have done, and we, that's what we've tried to commit both secure and ESH, to try to take the most cautious stance, both from a security standpoint, but also, we agree with you. Insofar as we can, we do not want to use the programmatic desks. We do not want to use them. Unless there is a safety and security concern, we are trying not to. Insecure is a good example. When we had the ability to assess, so it wasn't a hard line that we couldn't put in, it was an ability to assess, we have done that as thoughtfully as we can. There have been an instance or two where that was required, but mostly we have not. Numbers of 1, just remained low, and 2, some of the cohorts don't present some of the problems where we think that there is a danger between the 3 inmates who are together in a schoolroom.
Yeah, and then lastly, if you could examine, and you don't have to know about this now, one of the comments from the other representative from the Brooklyn Legal Aid Society indicated that someone was injured while in the desk. I'd like to know how that could happen. I'd like to know.
Yes.
The whole deal to me is about not being able to detect these weapons, and it's actually for the safety of these children.
Yeah.
And, if someone's injured in a restraint desk, it seems to me that that's a very problematic.
Yes, I mean, 3 points to that. One, in the beginning, we did have some issues, particularly with the placement of desks. We did have people who were... Their proximity, so people did actually attack each other from sitting in the desk. There was an occasion where Not sure how. There's an investigation going on. A key was displaced, so kind of working on trying to secure that. And third, I wanted to address one thing. Just categorically, there has not been a taser use in ESH. Absolutely. Monitor reviewed, just has not happened. No display, no use. It has not happened in ESH.
Okay, thanks.
Are you aware of anybody in a restraint desk having been injured by the desk itself? I thought that was not that someone else injured them while they were restrained, but injured by the desk, by virtue of being restrained in the desk.
I do not know of an instance.
Okay. I think that was...
Any injuries to people's ankles from the restraints?
I mean, I have, when you look around, I don't know. I am not aware of it.
So, well, that's another fact that we'll have to nail down.
And maybe we should ask H&H, because if there was injury, right, the person would have went to medical, right, and would have seen medical, or medical would have been called in. But I just want to acknowledge. I'm sorry, Ross. I'm sorry, Ross. I just
Stand
want
by.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge the commissioner. I think two things, and I just heard something new today. One is that we raised the issue of dogs in ESH, and there was an immediate response to that. Thank you, Commissioner, for taking that seriously and taking action on that. The dogs are out of EHS. That's great. The other thing I heard is you're saying now you want to eliminate the assessment, which is great. I would challenge the department to continue to make progress, and making progress by taking the arbitrary nature of that 45-day review, that it depends on what the individual did, or what did or did not happen, and make it a mandatory. Once they finish that level, if they have not received a new infraction, if they have not assaulted someone, if they have not engaged in behavior, that they automatically move to a least restrictive setting to manage both behavior and engage them in programs. Right now, we've heard testimony after testimony of young people saying, I got my 45-day review, and the captain or the officer told me, if I keep doing grievance, I'll be here. We have to take the decision-making for those 45 days, whether that's true or not, whether it happened or not. We have to take the review out of an individual's responsibility and say, look, if you don't get a new ticket, if you participate in programs, you're automatically going to the 45-day review. I think that both gives motivation and incentive for people to do the right thing, because they know if they don't, they're going to stay in that predicament, but if they do, they will move on, no questions asked. So I think we need to work on that.
Absolutely. We agree.
Dr. Cohen.
Jeff, one of the things that we had asked for was in the report, we recommended having the men in their participate in their own review for the 45 days. What is your response to that? And then I have another question.
I don't actually have an answer on that one, quite honestly. I think that they're right now evaluating how to redesign the multidisciplinary review so that we do incorporate more people. We are, again, asking for other people to be involved. So I will defer, only because I do not have a solid answer on that one.
Okay. And there's a directive that was developed in July of last year, or 16, right? I mean, there's no.
I don't know which directive.
The directive that sort of describes how you take care of people in the ESH, young adult, and no one who's trying to understand what it is we are approving the extension of has seen that. When is that going to be released?
I think one of the issues is that as we get close to releasing the final draft of the ESH directive, we appear before the board for variances, and then the circumstances of placement change or other aspects of the way the unit run change as well. So it's this back and forth. We're hopeful that once we go into rulemaking and we're able to know exactly what it is that the department needs to do with the ESH unit, we will be able to develop a final directive, and then we will be able to implement that and train staff on all the details.
Is there any way the directive can be released now and then revised later as necessary? I mean, is that a possibility?
Well, that's something that perhaps after, if we're fortunate enough to get the variance approved, and we're able to develop the directive at that time, we can consider what to release at that time. But at this point, one of the concerns we have is that if we start releasing draft after draft, it gets very confusing. It doesn't represent what the agency is doing. And that's some of the challenges we need to face. But we're happy to work with the board to kind of come up with a way that we can be transparent and make sure that everyone understands how the unit is supposed to run.
No, I agree. I would not encourage you to release draft after draft, but you haven't released anything.
Yes.
So
well,
I think that, we're just encouraging you to put something out there that we can review, and then if it needs to be revised, it can be. And you said you consider that, so I think, hopefully the consideration ends in an affirmative conclusion.
Thank you.
Judge Hamill.
Yes, just a couple of things. I want to go back to Stanley Richards' point about the time frame. Let me just ask, I know you consulted with VERA, who are national experts, and we've consulted with all these national experts, and we're being told, as VERA has said, is there really shouldn't be predetermined timeframes in these restrictive units. There should be individual assessments so that young people or adults can move at their own rate of progress, especially when you consider young people, how they look at time, 30 days, 45 days, long time. Is there a reason you haven't adopted that recommendation from VERA, that for in the enhanced supervision, it not be a predetermined time frame, but people be able to progress as they are participating and progressing?
Sure. One, VERA did not give us that recommendation for the young adults, but two, I think what we are trying to do is kind of vary the progression of that evaluation, because just from a scheduling standpoint, kind of reviewing and having the multidisciplinary team go into that, I think we are trying to take a look at, one, minimizing and trying to get more frequency with that evaluation, but I will, again, defer to the fact that they're building that team now to do more of it.
Let me just clarify. I don't think VERA's actually completed the assessment on adolescent young adult, but with respect to enhanced supervision as a whole in all restrictive housing, are you saying that they didn't recommend that there not be predetermined timeframes?
They asked us, I think, from my recollection, to do more frequent.
To do more frequent?
Yes, and that's like, as I said, we were trying to explore and do that, to minimize the time and do more frequent evaluations. But there wasn't one that said there should be no
Okay,
time.
even assuming that, they recommended that a long time. What's taking so long to implement it?
I think as I think we've described, like, we are trying to figure out kind of space issues as well to move and progress people through.
So there may
That is
not
not
be
the only-
places to progress them to. Is that the concern?
No, I think that what we have tried to do for ESH, very specifically, is take a look at the progression across the different units. We have tried to focus on how this works within the continuum of progression from, especially for young adults, all the way from second chance to true to secure and to ESH. As you know, we have had to face within the last several months kind of a restructuring of different parts of these units. Secure, for example, we changed the criteria, so we did not place the most violent in secure and then move them into ESH. So as we make all of those changes, we are, and this is not a reason for not sharing a directive, but we are making changes to how we work within each of those different units, because each of them requires a different approach. And so we are trying to solidify that. I mean, I think that that's an area for us.
So let me just ask, in the young adult enhanced supervision, in the variance itself, I didn't see any mention of restraints. So Are you asking?
It's not
What's the restraint
I'll have
policy
Heidi
then?
insert it.
There wasn't anything in the written variance regarding the utilization and your restraint policy. I know in the past it's been left out, and we've asked that you put it in so that all the parties are informed and the Board of Correction is informed what you're asking for, but there's no mention of it in the written. So what are you asking for in terms of restraints, or how do you plan to use them?
So my understanding of the process of requesting a variance is that we're asking for a variance from the existing rules. Since there are no rules that require or govern the use of restraint desks, there is no, that we're not asking for a variance from a rule that doesn't exist. So I understand that there are conditions that have been placed on the department when we've asked for variances in the past. We understand that, but in terms of how we frame and make the request for a variance, that's the reason why there's no reference to that in the letter.
Okay, so let me just follow that up. And I made this in my comments. Can you explain to me how you comply with your own Department of Correction policy, which I understand has been approved tentatively by the federal mandate, that there be no restraints, young people in desks for longer than 4 hours, how you comply with that, and the lockout that we have mandated of 7 hours, since we've been informed by staff, by inmates, by advocates, that the lockout, and even today, I believe by your own staff, that the lockout period is 7 hours at a stretch. So how do you do that then?
Well, the restraint directive requires that someone not be in a restraint desk for 4 continuous hours. We also offer options we're supposed to offer options on the hour. And so with all those procedures in place, the expectation is that a person who would not be in for 7 continuous hours.
No, but just the very narrow issue is, based on what you're saying, they can't be in continuously for 4 hours. If the lockout period, which is mandated as 7 hours, is at one stretch, as it is and has been, how do you give them the 7 hours without being in continuous leg restraints, other than a 5-minute break in every hour? Do you understand my question?
Yeah, no, we're going to go back to that, right?
I understand also that there are other services that are provided that provide the breaks. So there might be recreation, there may be other services that are offered when someone has to be escorted to a particular program. So when you put that all together, the idea that someone is going to be, our procedures permit or are set up so that an individual is not restrained in the program desks for more than 4 continuous hours.
So then, just to be clear, are you saying that the 7 hours of lockout that the board has mandated, that you're including in that just the 4 hours of continuous leg restraints, but there's other things you let them do, a shower, recreation, that's supposed to make up the other 3 hours? You see, my problem is I can't see, since you do one lockout, and please let me know what I'm missing here, since you do one lockout from either 5 to 12 or 1 to 8, there's one lockout per day for all the young people for 7 hours, and they can't be in a restraint desk for more than 4 hours, and according to your own policy, that includes the offer of a few minutes break in between on every hour, then how are they actually being offered 7 full hours if they have to be in leg restraint?
I don't know that, I mean, when you do the math, I don't know that that's how it adds up to. So it's hard to know without looking at an individual person who has gone through, being taken out of their cell, being brought to the restraint desk when they choose to. Not everybody avails themselves of the full time out. So there are a lot of circumstances, and it depends. But the final point is that we hope that the procedures that we put in place, especially with the hour options, with all the different services, that individuals are expected to be able to be removed from the program desks at the 4 continuous hour mark.
Thank you.
Good. Conditions, yeah.
Actually, can I just say one more?
Yeah, go ahead, and we'll
response to
get
all
to
this?
the condition.
Yes, before we get to the conditions, first, I just want to thank our incredible Board of Corrections staff for not only the young adult enhanced supervision assessment, but also very recently, there were some critical observations made, and also the board was informed about complaints from inmates and from their family. And I wish to share them because they'll be related to the proposed conditions. We've been informed by our own staff that most young adults are spending nearly all day locked in their cells rather than the minimum 7 hours provided for under the enhanced supervision standards, and that 65 young adult placements in enhanced supervision from September 2016 to March 2017, only 25 of those young adult placements were informed of and provided written justification for the use of the restraint desk restriction, and that most young adults whose placement continued in enhanced supervision with restraint desks, that being 29 out of 54, failed to receive proper due process for the restraint desk restriction as required by our standards. That in terms of out of cell, the participation in programming, mental health services, and recreation has been very low. That school is not a classroom, it has too many distractions, it has insufficient capacity, and is not conducive to meaningful education. I also want to highlight a couple of comments that some of the young people and their family members have said to our staff. A grandmother wrote to the Board of Corrections saying, every day he's stripped naked and handcuffed to a chair for hours while a dog is running loose. This is inhumane. A mother told us that her son is chained whenever he's out of cell and shouldn't be treated like this, saying that the DOC staff has come and advised him to stop calling 311 and to tell his family to stop calling 311. Another young adult said he's been there for 3 weeks and has not seen social services. He wants to file an Article 78, but he doesn't know how to do it, and that it's the correction officer who comes around and offers a law library, not a legal coordinator, and only brings the information that's requested. Another one told us he's seated at a restraint desk alone after he first got on the floor, and he asked if they could work some cushioning into his ankle restraints, and he showed our staff cuts on both of his ankles where the restraints had dug in. And again, many complaints about law library, not really having full access to law library. We'd also heard in enhanced supervision from another young man that he had been there for 9 months, that he hadn't gotten a 45-day review, that the reviews are not priced, he doesn't go to recreation, he's locked in like a cage, and that's why he doesn't go. And he said that this is bad for his health, that he can't walk around, he can't be free, and he feels he's on the verge of breaking and doing something dumb and snapping. Matter of fact, some of the staff, ESH staff, told our staff that some of the ESH staff said these young people are ticking time bombs being restrained like this. Another young man wanted to file a constitutional lawsuit claiming that the conditions in enhanced supervision are cruel and unusual punishment. I just want to say it's very important to understand that the federal courts and the federal monitor set the constitutional floor. But even the monitor in the last report reported that the Department of Corrections should reduce its reliance on physical restraints, which is only authorized 4 hours, not 7 hours at a stretch, increase programming, and use multidisciplinary teams. Based on my own questioning, it's clear you're not complying with the 7 hours of lockout. In any event, it's important to remember the Board of Correction has the authority to give more rights than the federal constitutional floor based upon sound correctional, psychiatric, and psychological principles, which we've learned during our restrictive housing, and which I have already stated. I'm going to be recommending, based on all the reasons that I've stated today, the experts, the advocates, that we should eliminate the young adult enhanced supervision assessment unit and reduce this continuous use of restraints to comply with the ABA criminal justice standards and the psychiatric principles. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Does anyone on the board have a condition or a set of conditions they want to propose? Dr. Cohen?
Yeah, can I
James.
just add?
Oh, sorry.
I'd just like to add to the conversation.
Yeah, sure.
Just real quickly. Everybody in this room, okay, got to understand. it seems like we have two separate sides. It should be one side, keeping people safe. Because when people are not safe, nothing else that we're discussing in this room really matters. Now, about 10 years ago, I was sitting in uniform on the other side, and the board was fighting like crazy to reduce punitive segregation. Each charge would hold about 90 days. There were people in punitive segregation for years, literally years. The department wasn't trying to hear making it less. They were trying to make it more. But yet, it seems like recently we've gotten to an agreement and a good working relationship where punitive segregation has not only gotten less, we've taken kids out of punitive segregation. We eliminated it. We basically made history. When I was the warden in that facility, there was 90 people, 90 kids, 16 and 17-year-old, in punitive segregation, locked in, some with years, very problematic. Somehow, some way, we all got together and did the best we can to eliminate it. It is now eliminated. Punitive segregation now, you can't spend more than 60 days a year in punitive segregation. The mountains where we've come from is huge, and it's because of you, it's because of this board, and it's because of the department working together. Now what's happening is the department can no longer put somebody in a cell for 23 hours a day and lock them down, because there's about a small percentage of the population, I would say anywhere between 5 to 10%, causing probably 90% of the havoc that we're incurring right now. So we need not to go back to punitive segregation. I believe that. I don't believe in punitive segregation. I don't think it works, okay? And I don't think it's good for the individual, and I think we're going in a great direction. But by eliminating that, we have to figure out something to keep people safe. Now, ESH might not be the way to go, or it might not be the best route right now, but it's got to be worked on. It's got to be something. Because if we eliminate ESH right now and we don't have punitive segregation, how do we keep people safe? Okay, so, I mean, I just need to say that. I have 27 years of correctional experience, and I think we're going in a great direction, and I think everybody in this room has a purpose and is doing an amazing job with a tremendous amount of passion. But we should not forget the one most important thing that could be said in this room. There's nothing more important than keeping people safe, because if people aren't safe, and when I say people, I mean the population in the facilities, I mean the officers, the correctional staff, and I mean the people, the doctors and the nurses, everybody that has trying to do the right thing, okay? If they do not feel safe, nothing else we do matters. Just had to say that because I know we're going in 10 different directions, but it's very important to just keep in mind when we're making these decisions. No, ESH isn't perfect right now, and it's a lot of problems. And I think, you know, evaluating 45 days should be less. It should be an ongoing thing, because if someone is doing well, we should be keeping an eye on them and moving them on instead of keeping them in an environment that's only detrimental to them. Yes, we need to do that as a board. We need to do that as a community. But we can't just say, okay, let's get rid of it because we don't like it. If we did, and that small percentage goes into the population, they're going to hurt people. People could die. Okay, then what are we going to say then? We failed to protect them. So we need to all in this room get together and figure out something that's going to work so the department can have the tools to make it work instead of keep continuing, it seems like, arguing. Yes, no, yes, no. Let's do it together and find something that's going to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reno. I think it's a very important comment. Thanks very much for that. Dr. Cohen?
Yes, I'm going to speak in favor of a condition for this variance, which is that young adults in ESH will not be subject to restraint desks at any time. Most of the young adults are actually not in GMDC or in ESH. They're all over the place. We should understand this is a long. You talk about it as a work in progress. I mean, ESH has been around for a long time right now. I don't see it as progress, I must say. I was there last week. The kind of things I saw were not progress. You said you're going to fix them, but you've known about them forever. They're in our report. There are structural elements which prevent people from going to school and having recreation. That's designed within the program. We've talked about this, and you agree that that's the case. It shouldn't be my responsibility to go out there and find out that you're not providing people the option to both have education and to go to recreation. I shouldn't go out to ESH and see a psychiatrist come to the door of a person there for their therapeutic session, be told by the person who's on the phone, I can't speak to you right now. I don't believe it was a scheduled at-cell psychiatry evaluation that this psychiatrist was doing. He was brought there, by an escort. This is terrible. I'm very embarrassed that that Health and Hospitals would send their psychiatrists to do a cell front visit, as I saw. There are too many people. There are more people who want to go to school than can go to school. There are the restraints are punitive. They're humiliating. They place people at risk for injury and for from the chains themselves and from others. We're going to hear another proposal today from Brianne, in which she's going to talk about the ABA and other kinds of restraints. Now, I've always supported the use of restraints in cases where it is necessary to restrain someone for their safety or for the safety of others. But I am not talking about, and I hope that the resolution, if the board approves something involving that ABA or the American Psychiatric Nurses Association things, those policies are only when the person is causing a risk to themselves or to someone else, not a routine use of a restraint chair. And in fact, I don't think there's any need for restraint chairs if you're going to use restraints in emergencies. And I'm not going to support the use of restraint chairs. It is great that the department is no longer going to have dogs in ESH disrupting classes and intimidation. And I appreciate the commissioner's decision to do that. But also there should not be restraint chairs. That's another thing that came in a previous administration that we should be that should and can be ended and can be ended, as can the use of tasers by this administration. I think that the goal of setting up ESH...
Can you just restate what your
yeah, I want to talk about
is?
why these restraints are a problem. I bet you have another minute.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm sorry, restate what?
I just wanted you to restate the specific wording of your condition so we know what it is.
Young adults in ESH will not be subject to restraint desks at any time.
Okay.
That's
fairly straightforward. Got it.
Okay. The goal was 2 years ago, was to close down solitary confinement for pretrial men and women under 22. It was less than that. It was a year and a half ago. And the department does not use restraints or PSU for 16 or 17-year-olds. ESH1 is PSU. ESH1 is punitive segregation with restraints. You're either locked up in your cell or you're locked out of your cell with leg irons on in a humiliating situation where your mother calls up and says, my son is being chained up all day long. This is not what this is an added humiliation, and the indeterminacy of this project brings us back to the old kind of punitive segregation. Before, as you said, Ms. Perino, people were locked up for years, right? I mean, we reviewed people who were 16 and 17-year-olds spending years in solitary confinement. Now you can be in ESH1 status, whether or not you get without the assessment unit when the department ends that, and be there forever, because there is no limit on the amount of time you can be there. So it's returning to those old days of solitary confinement, which I thought we were we were going to end. Having people in pretrial confinement shackled is not the way to go. If there are needs for restraints, they should be done for the safety of the person or for safety of the others for as little time as is necessary and not on a routine basis. I would appreciate support from other members of the board.
I think we're going to now take a roll call vote on Dr. Cohen's proposal, and Dr. Cohen's proposal is that there be no use of restraints
Chairs.
in ESH.
No use of restraint chairs.
Chairs, right.
Restraint desks, I mean, it's not chairs, restraint desks.
Restraint desks.
chairs, the department has agreed not to train or use people in yet. I hope that they're doing that. Restraint desks, are what I'm asking to not be,
At any time.
yes.
Is Mr. Reagan down there? Can't see him. Are you in favor of that, Pro?
No.
No.
And I said before, I think these things are horrible. But until they figure out a way, and it sounds like the only solution is legislative, but until they figure out a way to deal with these knives, Stanley and I were on the island, we spoke to 2 kids. The kid said, I won't go to school unless there's a chair, because he's afraid of getting stabbed.
Right.
So, Bobby, I respect it. I see you.
No, I respect also, what I would say is that...
Let's take the vote
I
first. And
understand,
then
but let me just respond to that personal comment, personal privilege, that in 16 and 17-year-olds, they don't have that. That is not an issue of restraining people, it's an issue of providing adequate security support for it. So you can't, because that's an argument to lock everybody up all the time.
All right, we're in the voting booth now. We have to vote.
No.
Mr. Perino?
No.
No.
Yes.
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 Dr. Carr, I assume you vote for your own proposal, yes?
Yes.
Ms. Austin?
Yes.
And I'm going to vote no. And Mr. Richards, is he here?
He's coming in right now.
We need 5 to carry it, correct?
Yes, we need 5 votes to pass a variance.
So we have-
Or variance. It's a condition.
Wait, Dr. Bryant, you didn't vote, sorry. Oh, and your vote is?
No.
No. So Bobby, you don't get it, it's not going to carry because...
No, you said Stanley has to vote.
Yeah,
Oh, that still wouldn't.
yeah.
No, I know it was not going to pass, I just wanted to hear what his...
Okay, so if the vote fails.
Is Stanley voting?
Stanley, you vote, this is the condition. Dr. Cohen, you state your condition again.
The condition was...
Just the condition.
Just the condition is young adults in ESH will not be subject to restraint tests at any times. There are now 3 votes for and 4 votes against.
And the head shake means?
Oh, yes.
Yes, okay. So that's 4 to 4.
Can I propose a condition then?
Yes.
That's related to
So we'll take another condition from Judge Hamill.
This is essentially the American Bar Association criminal justice standards for restraint, and also what psychological and psychiatric experts say. Restraints, including restraint desks, shall not be used except to control an incarcerated person who presents an immediate risk of self-injury or injury to others, to prevent serious property damage, for health care purposes, or when necessary as a security precaution, transferring or transporting the incarcerated person. When restraints are necessary, the department shall use the least restrictive form of restraint that are appropriate, and shall use them only as long as the need exists, not for a predetermined period of time. That's the condition I move.
Okay, is there any debate, any conditions, any discussion on that? If not, we'll take a vote. Yeah, Judge Hamill, can you reread that?
Sure, and just so that everyone's clear, this is just reading essentially verbatim the American Bar Association criminal justice standards, and much of this is incorporated, or much of what psychiatric and psychological experts recommend regarding the use of restraints, and even Vera used this standard when I spoke with them. Restraints, including restraint desks, shall not be used except, and these are the conditions when you can use restraint desks, except to control an incarcerated person who presents an immediate risk of self-injury or injury to others, to prevent serious property damage, for health care purposes, or when necessary as a security precaution during transfer or transport. When restraints are necessary, the department shall use the least restrictive form of restraints that are appropriate and shall use them only as long as the need exists, not for a predetermined period of time.
Mr. Reagan?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Richards?
Yes.
Mr. Perino?
Yes.
Excuse me, Chair. This is something that we're, in terms of a condition, we're haven't had time from the department standpoint to fully evaluate what it is that this proposal was. I think it has very significant impact on what it is that the department can do with the use of restraints, and it may seem from listening to the language that it's not as impactful, but we're very concerned that this can really impact the security, and we haven't had a full chance to discuss internally and to be able to present fully to the board on the impact that this has. So I don't know if this is an appropriate time to take a break or to further engage, or if there's a way to defer this to some other time.
I actually would like to just respond to that.
Yeah, go, and I don't want to defer it either, but go
And
ahead.
this is, you know, Derek, our chair, set up a lovely luncheon for some of us to meet with the new commissioner. And everything that I've said here today, I shared with Cynthia Brown at that meeting, including that this should be the proposed use, this would be what I would be proposing in terms of the use of restraints. I shared with her what we had heard from the various experts. I shared with her what we were being told in terms of the Civil Rights Commission. So this information, I am not just springing on the Department of Correction today. My colleagues were there, other board staff was there, Jeff was there. So this is the recommendation. In my opinion, the vote should go forward.
Yeah, it is going to go forward. I don't think anybody here is interested in deferring a vote on this. Unless you are, you please tell me.
No.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Chair. I just understand that that's not in the list of conditions that the department has received, so this is just a surprise to us. So this is, in terms of transparency, this is something that we would have hoped to be able to consider.
I hear that point. I think then you should take some time to consider it before you implement it, assuming that it's going to be voted in. I mean, I'm not inclined to table this this proposal. Mr. Richards, have I called on you yet?
No.
You're in favor? Yes or no?
Favor.
Okay. Judge Amos, okay? Yes. Okay. It carries unanimously. I vote in favor of it as well. Are there any other conditions? Judge Hamill.
I have another one, and this is with respect to really eliminating the assessment unit, which DOC has already said they want to eliminate. And that proposed condition is the department may operate 4 levels of young adult enhanced supervision, with level 1 being the most restrictive. There shall not be any other levels or units of young adult enhanced supervision for assessment purposes or any other reason. So in other words, authorizing what the adults are authorized, which is a level 1 to level 4. That would essentially eliminate the assessment unit that I'm arguing in DC policy, legal people say violates civil rights. That was certainly discussed with the commissioner as well, that I would be proposing this, and I also spoke with her again this morning.
And is that, did I hear that in the department's discussion earlier that that's something that either you're going to do or you're seriously consider doing?
So 2 separate things. One,
Yep.
yes, we have committed to eliminating the entry and assessment unit, so that will go away. The language specifically and locking into just 4 levels, we had not previously discussed, because I understand that while we're trying to work on this, we have, in the past, we started off with no levels, and we added levels. So my only concern is that, locking in without giving the opportunity to kind of assess what is necessary in terms of progression. I mean, I don't have, particularly for the time of the variance, we have enough on our plate that we have to, during the pendency of the variance, I can agree to it. Judge, I understand what's going on, but I do think the wording isn't quite as flexible as it should
Let me
be.
ask this question then. So would you be agreeable to something where at least you won't reinstitute an assessment
The entry, and so yes.
in some other name or
Yes.
some other form?
Yes.
And so if that's okay with you, then
That's all. I mean,
maybe
and
Judge
again,
Hamill,
Judge, honestly, in
I take it-
practicality, I think you're right. And during the pendency of a variance, I don't think it's going to get there.
I would suggest that you just agree with this, because right now we have level 1 to 4. If you recall, from the day you walked in with that assessment unit, I have always voted against it. And the way it was presented, it wasn't really clear that it was going to be this separate unit, 30 days, and it'd be in restraints, and then go into another one. So let's just, everybody can be clear and transparent, level 1 to 4. We are a public board. Should there be an emergency, you could always come back to us on an emergency variance, and we would have to convene a special board meeting to entertain it.
Well, look, if the agreement is that there will be no assessment unit in that name or any other name, nothing substantive that equals that, I think the department is asking for some flexibility as to how they then restructure it, assuming the assessment unit goes away.
Well, then I would suggest to at least say the department may operate young adult enhanced supervision with level 1 of current young adult enhanced supervision being the most restrictive. Otherwise, they could create another level and have it equally restrictive.
Is that okay with you?
And not call it
Fair
assessment.
enough.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Fine.
Fair enough.
So, is that the substance of that condition, Judge Allen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so we'll take a vote on that. Mr. Reagan?
Yes.
Mr. Perino?
Yes.
Mr. Richards? Oh, somebody's behind? Oh, sorry, he's sitting back in his chair there, okay.
Richards,
Then,
yes.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Carries unanimously, thank you. Are there any other conditions?
There's lots of other conditions. So,
What a surprise.
so can we, but, Member Cohen, you have some specific other ones. Do you want to start with yours, or do you want me to go through the ones that are, okay. This is an existing condition on the variance. Each request for approval of a placement of a young adult in young adult ESH, i.e. any ESH unit where young adults are housed, must be in writing and specify the reasons why a less restrictive housing setting is not a safe option. If the placement is to include the use of a restraint desk, the request for approval must include why young adult ESH without restraint desks is not a safe option. The chief of department or designee must also specify her reasons for approving or disapproving the request for young adult ESH placement. If the placement is to include the use of a restraint desk, the chief or her designee must separately approve or disapprove this use and specify her reasons for approving or disapproving the use of a restraint desk. The request for approval and the chief's or designee's approval or disapproval thereof shall be sent within 24 hours to the person who is the subject of the request, New York City Health and Hospitals, and the board. That's an existing condition. If we could just vote on that, and I'll go to the next.
Okay, Mr. Reagan?
Yes.
Perino?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
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 Passes unanimously. Next.
So now, on our list, Member Cohen, these are two new conditions that you had proposed.
Right. The first one is prior to placing an individual in YAESH, the department must provide the individual with notice of a hearing. Such notice shall advise the individual of their rights to have counsel present at the hearing to advocate on their behalf. A copy of the notice shall also be provided to defense counsel. I just think it's important as we develop, you know, in a unit like YAESH, it's serious to have someone there. They can be there for a long period of time, and they should have the right to be defended at the time of the hearing. And their attorney should know that this is happening.
Can you read that again? Sorry.
Yeah. Prior to placing an individual in YAESH, the department must provide the individual with notice of a hearing. Such notice shall advise the individual of their right to have counsel present at the hearing to advocate on their behalf. A copy of the notice shall also be provided to defense counsel.
This again, Chair, is something that is raised for the first time, and this has, again, great impact on the way that we would operate this unit. I don't even know if we would be able to do this. And I don't know effectively if this means that we wouldn't be able to operate ESH. So I really do think and hope that we can engage with the board on something as significant as this as a proposal. The other conditions we've shared, and we've engaged in discussion on this, and so that would be a request that the department is making.
Does the board have any comment on the department?
I have a question.
I have a question, too.
Do you have currently, in due process, does a detainee have representation or the right to representation?
Right now, what the SCOC minimum standards provide for, and what we do is we give inmates an opportunity to contact a hearing facilitator. That hearing facilitator explains anything that the inmate doesn't understand, can explain about process. If someone is unable to comprehend English, there would be an effort to, and is seeking an interpreter, we would undertake the effort to find an interpreter for that person. So we do have a process in place to provide someone a hearing facilitator.
Would they also be able to bring in a witness or a character?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and when anyone wants to provide evidence, they are permitted to put forth that evidence and ask to have a witness provide a statement, also share with the adjudication captain who is adjudicating the matter the ability to reach out to those witnesses and to provide evidence if that would be supportive of their defense.
Okay, thank you.
And my question is that another officer, or is it a civilian? The person, the facilitator?
Right, we have a hearing, our legal coordinator through the library, they provide those types of services, the hearing facilitators.
Dr. Corn, do you have a response to what the department's, does that meet your objectives?
Well, I mean, there are two parts to this thing. One is that the defense counsel be notified, and two is that there be representation. And I think there should be representation. I'm prepared to have a further discussion about this. I know there are discussions that the department is having with the defense bar in the city regarding notification of these kinds of hearings. Is that something the department would be willing to discuss?
I have a question. When you say defense counsel, who are you referring to?
Legal aid, Bronx Defenders, Brooklyn Defenders. Neighborhood Defender Service.
I would also add just that anyone who wants to challenge this placement, there are procedures that a person can follow to challenge the placement, and that could be challenged and brought before what's called writ court.
But that's after the fact, or no?
That is after the fact, and or during, the process goes forward, but a person can challenge it, and if someone is feeling that they've been placed in ESH for too many months and they feel that the basis for the determination is not supported, that they can challenge that. I do want to ask, I'm not quite clear on the condition that's been proposed regarding a hearing. Is it a hearing that will happen before someone actually is placed in the ESH unit?
Yes.
So if there's an emergency and someone has stabbed or slashed somebody and we need an immediate placement, are you saying that we need to put that person back in general population?
No.
So where would we?
You have a PhD, so there's sort of a PhD equivalent.
Right, so you're saying that we could, we don't have a PhD because that's for punitive segregation.
Yes.
So we don't have a PhD set up.
Yes.
But you're saying that if we set something up that a person could be put into ESH 1 pending the hearing, that's something that would be acceptable to the board?
Yes.
Can I just ask, would there be any objection, because, some of the comments that I've said, that the young people have said and the family have said, is that they're having, they're feeling that the conditions are cruel and inhuman. So it seems to me that at least the lawyers should be notified that they're put in this highly restricted unit. Did you have any objection to at least notifying the defense attorney that they're in this unit now?
Judge, all these ideas could very well be something that we could work out with the department and the Board of Correction and have a conversation, because at the end of the day, we want to do the right thing here. And so we're happy to engage in discussion, but it's very hard to really think through these proposals in this forum when they have operational impact on the department, and we don't even have a chance to confer what could be done. So I really do think that it serves all of us, serves the department, serves the Board of Corrections, serves the community, and serves the individuals who are subject to placement in ESH if we can have a more meaningful discussion in a forum where we have time to think through all the issues. And I don't think that we're in that place right now.
Dr. Cohen, would you consider withdrawing this conclusion, this condition, and then between now and the January meeting, working out something with the department and bringing it back?
Yes, I'll do that for the next one as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I'm going to continue.
Yep.
On your list, number 5 was already passed. Number 6, a young adult can only be placed in a restraint desk for out-of-cell time if the person has recently participated in an actual or
So
attempt.
Martha,
Yes.
based on mine that just
You wanna
passed,
think
this
it?
would be deleted.
Yeah, I think
This wouldn't be.
that already covers it. Yeah.
Same language.
Shall I go on to the next one is yours, Judge Hamel? Or the due process we had?
Given
You
what was
wanna
just approved,
ignore
we
it?
wouldn't need that.
And what about the next one? That was also yours? Number 8 on this list?
Right, we wouldn't need that now to be deleted.
And the next,
So 7, 8, and 9 would no longer be necessary based on the,
and then, so you don't think 10 is either?
what do you think about 10?
I think this is.
Well, not routinely, I mean, yeah, I think that's right. I mean, 10, just for people, 10 says, the department shall not use 3 or more point restraints from YAESH. I believe the resolution that we passed said you can only, we're not defining what restraints can be used in an emergency situation.
So we'd delete that. We'd delete that.
Should we take a 5-minute recess?
What about, can we just go to the next one straightforward? The department shall not keep K-9 stationed in young adult ESH units?
Yes.
Well,
Say they're not
It's not,
It's not resolved, I mean, it's a promise right now. And I guess it's been done. It's been done, but there's a
we should
policy
vote
in place.
But I think the commissioner committed and took out the dogs from ESH, and I think this is a way in which, right, it's not a written policy, but I would like to sort of take a leap of faith on this. We have a new commissioner, she's leading, she's committed to us that she will not use dogs in ESH. And I think this is a way to start off the relationship. And we could add the condition, but she gave us her word that she pulled out. Am I right? The dogs are out of ESH. They're not going back there.
Well, no, I agree, that's fine, but, this is a legal process we have to go through, so if that's a condition that people want, then I think we ought to vote on it.
I think we should vote on it. Now, all the experts we spoke to, of everything we told them about young adult, it was having the dogs there shocked the conscience, because it's essentially law enforcement using dogs to intimidate. And so I think we should vote it. I trust the commissioner won't use it either, but that's why we have a Board of Correction, we have conditions, and we have rules to ensure.
Mr. Reagan, this is voting for or against the dogs.
No, it's already resolved. We could have conditions that go on for here for the rest of our lives.
And we very well may, so.
We could have conditions about how many times we serve kale. We could have conditions. This is not what the Board of Corrections is supposed to be about. I vote no.
So I'm not understanding your vote. You're voting against the condition?
Against the condition.
Although that's exactly what the department says they want to do.
No, I believe the commissioner's already resolved this issue.
But then why are you voting against it? I just want to make sure you're voting the way you intend to vote.
You abstain?
I don't believe we should require this. That's
Okay.
why I'm voting no.
So you're against it. Okay. Mr. Perino?
See, I agree. I don't think we should be voting on it, but at the end of the day, keeping the canines out of secure, I agree with.
So you vote yes?
Yes.
Mr. Bryant?
Yes.
Richards?
I vote yes with comment. I agree we don't need to do it. Commission already did it, but I
Judge
vote
Hamel?
yes.
Yes.
Mr. Cohen? Ms. Jones-Austin? I vote, okay, so the motion carries.
The next condition relates to something, actually, Stanley, that we've talked about before, and you've talked about a lot, which is the hours of school time being inclusive or exclusive of the 7 hours out of cell. The condition proposed here is that the department shall provide all young adults housed in ESH with a minimum out-of-cell time of 7 hours per day, which is not inclusive of school hours.
Does the department have a view on that?
We're willing to explore it.
Okay.
That's been the view for some time, so shall we
Can I-
vote? Yeah.
Do you want to put that to a vote? Mr. Reagan?
Yes.
Mr. Perino?
Yeah, I think that would incentivize people to go to school, so I say yes.
Bryant?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Hamel?
Yes.
Cohen?
Yes.
Jones-Austin?
Yes.
Yep, carries unanimously. Thank you.
Yes.
Caution up front, we will not be in compliance.
Sorry?
Just space-wise and working with DOE to kind of get, and I just want to caution up front. 10 hours kind of with the school, just from a scheduling and a space-wise, we will not be in compliance for a while.
You will not be
Just
able
want
to...
to be in compliance. We will not be in compliance. We have to figure out the space and figure out the DOE partnership, but just upfront, we haven't had those conversations. As I said earlier, we're exploring those conversations and trying to work with them and also trying to identify space to construct kind of the classroom space that allows us to do that. And that is a commitment that we've made, but just as a condition that would potentially take effect tomorrow, we would be out of compliance.
Mr. Richards, would you consider like a 2-month grace period on this one?
I feel like
Or no?
there's been an ongoing conversation
Okay.
with this, and we've had, this one is not something that we just recently spoke about. This is one that we've been asking about. We've been going on good faith, and the department said, we're gonna try to work it out. And then we get, like, you listed the numbers, 1,000 young people, 25 young people in restrictive housing, 9 people in ESH, level 1 or whatever it is. The number is so small. We've been having this ongoing conversation. And I agree with Perino, this is an incentive for young people to say, the 3 hours at a school is in addition to your 7 hours out. I just don't see, and I understand if you're talking about doing it for the entire ESH, having school for everybody, but we're talking about for young people.
Right, so I'm in full agreement that we want to be able to provide that, but it also depends on the number of people that are enrolled in school. Today, there are 13 people that are enrolled in school and only 6 that attend. So today, the numbers are good. But once you get to the space where all of our young adults cannot be, the new rule right now at this moment is that there are no restraints anywhere. I'm going to guarantee that the number of school attendance or the number of people who enroll in school to go and hang out with friends or to do other things will increase. And once it increases, I won't lie to you and tell you that we'll be in compliance.
So let's do this halfway, right? Can we change the condition to add that this will be the standard, and if the department, if it gets to a level where you cannot, what would that number look like?
I don't know. We have to do the calculations based on space and based on the numbers, and it would change because remember, 18 to 21-year-olds, educational services are voluntary. So today I could say I don't want to go to school, and tomorrow I could say yes. The number will change every day, and I don't want to sit up here and tell you something that I cannot commit to.
But today you can. You could do it.
Today, I can tell you that there are 13 people enrolled in school. Tomorrow, there might be 50 people enrolled. Well, it won't be 50 because there are only 25 kids. But I'm just saying that based on the numbers, each day, we would have to make a calculation and based on safety concerns. So I don't want to say that I'm going to be in compliance because I have never lied up here and I will not choose to do that today.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. but I think the numbers are small enough. I think we could do it.
I would just ask if that is the direction of the board, that at least we include in a condition, except under circumstances where there's not sufficient space, or the third party, the Department of Ed, have challenges that they can't meet that, the school, but somehow building in some sort of exception if there are insufficient space.
Agreed.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so the vote carries subject to that.
And we should be notified if that exists. Heidi, the condition, with that addition, we should be notified if that condition exists.
I'm told that this is a daily condition. We're notifying you now that it's not something that, I don't know that we're going to be able to comply with this. So again, we would really like to engage with the board and be able to comply with the minimum standards. And my concern is that by setting this, by passing this resolution, by passing this rule, it's really setting up the department to set back. We're regressing. We're already starting off at a negative that we can't comply with this rule. And we are really trying to work on
you can comply
an
with it now, but
alternative.
you can't, if you don't comply with it later, it'll be because of space considerations. Is that correct?
Well, it's, if the board is going to pass this rule, I'm trying to at least come up with some way that we have some way to explain the exceptional
No, I agree with
circumstances
that.
that would prevent us from complying. So maybe not just limiting it to space, but exceptional, if there are circumstances that prevent us from complying, we can notify the board and we can further engage.
So the problem here is that it's been maybe 6 months where there was a verbal agreement that this would be the direction that everybody would be moving in. And it was Stanley Richards and Wynette who've had this conversation, past meetings, it's in the minutes.
Yeah.
That is what inspired this condition. And so,
And the numbers have been
so
down.
and it's the same issues that you're facing now that sort of prevented it in the past. And so I would recommend the board move in the direction that it wants to go in on this issue without.
I just will offer some comments. As I said, that a number of different things that have been stated today, DOC is in agreement. But the one thing that I will say is that, two things. One is that we want to be sure that we're able to provide educational services in a safe space. With the new rules and the operational impact that this is going to make, I think that the conditions that lie before us now are different from when we had the conversation. In addition to that, when we had the conversation, we engaged other parties such as DOE and SCOC with developing and constructing a classroom so that we can make this happen. We were not successful in getting the design passed with the SCOC, so we're still in conversations on how to create that space. Without a classroom space that is enclosed, this does not seem like something that can be done safely. But I'm going to, I just want to just provide that information to you up front.
No, I appreciate it, but how long have the numbers, in terms of the ability, like you said, today we could do it, right? How long have the numbers been like that? And I understand that the numbers fluctuate.
So
we've been talking 6 months.
I'll give you an example. In September, in August. So the rollover, long story made short, is that when you look at enrollment in September, it includes rollovers from the previous year. So in September, there were 25 people enrolled. So in that case, just 5 weeks ago, I would not have been able to do it. So I'm just trying to give you the real-time data so that you know what's going to impede this condition. And like we've been talking, I am very interested in making this happen.
Yeah,
but without the appropriate space, it's hard to say that it can be done.
I'm confused about why it's a space issue and not just a scheduling issue.
Because a classroom right now in some of the units are open, You can't have lockout with other, because it's going to interrupt other people's lockout, right? Depending on the numbers of the people that are in, you might need to have those who are attending school in a closed space so that they're not interrupted or distracted by the others who are out on their regular lockout. So it all depends on the space that we have for school. If you have number of people in the housing area that are required for a 7-hour lockout, that's going to actually be during the same time frame as a 10-hour lockout. You understand?
Yeah,
When the other tier is locked
because
out.
the tiers come out at different sections, and it's 14 hours. There's 7 and 7. And so in providing for the extra hour, we need an additional space outside of that area to offer the school so that it's not to impede on the other tier that would come out for the other 7 hours. So it's a space issue in that we need to find a space outside of what we have now, or to build within an existing space a back classroom area, all of which would require the SDOC approval. Either way, if we're designing something outside of a unit or building a classroom within a unit, those will require design plans submitted to the SDOC and approved by the SDOC, and then our ability to build them. When the numbers are low enough, obviously, as Lynette has said, that is something we can do. But space is an issue at some point because there are only so much physical space in a housing unit by which we can offer the 7 hours for one tier and 7 for the other.
So if we can do it, and we'll add in Heidi's recommended language that gives the department that when it grows, if the numbers go up and you can't do it, that there's a way. I just want to get this started. It's almost like the restraint dress insecure. We said, let's just do it. Let's not wait for perfect before we can do it. Let's just start doing it. So if we can do it for a month, then let's do it for a month. If it grows, then you can't do it. I don't want to tie the department's hands and say, you got to put people at risk. So give you the ability to manage, but let's start doing it. If we can do it, let's start doing it.
So would the board be amenable to pilot it and then give you the results of it?
As long as we start doing it, yes.
Well, then, what's the condition then? What's the specific language? I thought the condition was that we begin it now, not a pilot, but that we begin it now.
Yeah,
And if circumstances occur where it can no longer be implemented, then you would come back to us, and there would be some room to suspend it or suspend it in part until you can then re-implement it. I thought that was what the proposal was.
That's the condition right there.
Yeah, okay.
That I would like to vote on.
Yeah, let's take a vote.
Can someone,
You just restated the actual condition. Martha, could you restate it with Derek's?
Yes, sort of. The department shall provide all young adults housed in ESH with a minimum out-of-cell time of 7 hours per day, which is not inclusive of school hours. If circumstances occur where DOC cannot comply, it will notify the board the reasons it cannot apply, the reasons why it cannot comply. Is that what you meant?
And that way we'll collect the data.
What you meant?
yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Can we vote on, do you have a quick comment? Can we vote on this?
Yes.
I just have very quick. There are 2 classrooms, so there are potentially 2 sessions in 2 places. I understand the difficulties, but there are already 2 classrooms.
Right, but don't forget that we have programming occurring for everyone in ESH. So the classrooms are also used for adults based on the housing area that you're referring to. So we can't look at the 2 classrooms that are available.
Mr. Reagan?
He stepped out.
Mr. Perino?
I'm going to agree.
Mr. Bryant?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Judge Hamel?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen? Ms. Jones-Austin?
Yes.
Okay, I'm in favor, so the motion carries. Is there anything else?
Shall we move forward? This is based on what has been successful reporting and communication about lockout in Secure. So this condition is modified from that. Commencing December 18th, 2017, the department shall notify the board in writing every time the lockout periods in young adult ESH does not start on time, do not start on time, and the reasons, therefore, the department shall provide written notice to the board within 24 hours of such occurrence.
Can you say this is already in place with regard to secure?
Yes.
So moved.
So we would ask for an amendment to implementation happening in January for us to kind of put in the capacity to do so, because in secure, it is a very small number of people with a far staff-richer environment than in ESH. To require that within ESH immediately, again, even in December, would not be possible.
So effective January 1st?
When do you need it?
I'm looking at someone operational to give me a kind of more firm date, and I don't have that, but we could say, January 15th would be.
This is to write down, to notify us when you're not locking people out? I mean,
Sir, with all due respect, I understand that we do have problems. I'm never going to stand up here and not say those things, but the capacity and the ability to kind of gather that information in a format for which to report it is different than just even documenting within a unit.
I don't understand that, but if that's what he says, then that's, I think, well, give him some time to, so January 15th?
January 15th.
Mr. Perino?
Yes.
Bryant? Yes. Richards?
Yes.
Judge Hamel?
Yes.
Cohen? Yep. I'm in favor of it. Motion carries.
The next condition is also based on an audit that I'm pleased that the department is doing in Secure, and that's an audit of its compliance with the minimum standards. The condition reads, the department shall conduct and report on a monthly audit of its compliance with BOC minimum standards. That relates to lock-in, access to courts and legal services, including law library, recreation, and classification, specifically the number of programming hours offered to each young adult and the number of hours each young adult participated in programming. Yes. This is a time frame issue. There was no stated time frame here. I did not state a time frame, so what is the?
It's fine for an audit, we can do that.
Sorry?
For the audit, similar to Secure, we're doing a 4 days, is that correct?
Yeah.
We didn't have a time frame here. There is a time frame?
We provide a monthly report and a 60-day report.
I didn't read the second part of this.
Okay.
The department shall provide its first monthly audit report to the board on January 15th, 2018. For the preceding month of December, the department shall provide monthly audit reports for each month thereafter by the 10th business day of the following month, except the report for the month this variance expires shall be provided by the 5th business day of the following month. Sorry, that's the complete condition.
Mr. Perino?
Excuse me, just to clarify, are you talking about just continuing what we already do? Providing the reports?
No, this is an audit that is done in Secure, where the department is auditing 4
We're talking
days.
about Secure or ESH?
We're trying to modify what's been a positive practice in Secure to ESH, which is looking at the 4 days, I think is what you've done in Secure, looking at 4 days, looking at the logbook, looking at the occurrences that in the unit to see what has been compliant with the minimum standards.
Okay, this is outside of programming. I thought you talked about programming earlier, I'm sorry.
So while this did take, so from my understanding, this did take about 3 months for us to implement in Secure. So I would ask for at least a bit of time as well for this to kind of get up and running in ESH. While we have had the capacity, we've started it, so it's not a new thing. We did have to spend 3 months building it in Secure. So I would ask the same because ESH requires, one, there are far more units in ESH than in Secure. So insofar as we can report it at the, end of February for January or beginning of March for January, however that works appropriately.
And what kind of time frame? Mr. Richards, anyone have a suggestion here?
February 15th for January?
I'm sorry, I just don't know the auditing team did this work, so I just want to be very cognizant of operationally of how the auditing team put that together. Insofar as it, again, I actually just don't know what the auditing team would do. I would I would not want to commit operationally. Again, I think that in this case, we're veering far into a lot of operational implications for which I have not had time to talk with people who do it.
So could we say the 15th, and they'll report out in our January meeting whether they're on track for that?
We'll adopt the timeframe with regard to February 15th, but they'll report at the January meeting. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Let us know whether
That's fine.
you have the capacity.
Mr. Perino?
Yes.
Bryant?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Hamel?
Yes.
Cohen?
Yes.
Jones Austin?
Yes.
Yep, affirmative, carries.
The next condition is an existing one where the department is permitted to consider a young adult's activity occurring or actions committed at a time prior to the instant incident in connection with the young adult's placement in young adult ESH. Such activity or actions must have occurred within the preceding year.
Yeah.
And that currently exists?
Correct.
Yes.
Is there a comment here from anybody on that? Perino?
Yes.
Bryant?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Hamel?
Yes.
Cohen?
Yes.
Jones Austin?
Yes.
Carries, thank you.
The next condition relates to progress through ESH. And the condition is, at each periodic review, a young adult will advance to a less restrictive level or unit unless, one, he is engaged in disruptive, violent, or aggressive behavior while in his current level, and/or two, there is credible intelligence that he may engage in additional violence in a less restrictive unit. And this is basically an existing condition. The one change is that there had been a third reason you would not advance, and that was if you had been placed in the unit multiple times. After reviewing that exception, we felt that these two were a better description with more specificity about what I think DOC and BOC meant in terms of who could not progress, and limiting that to actual behavior or credible intelligence.
So I would only like to address one thing. This focuses very much on the progression.
Yes.
There needs to be at least an acceptance then that for a move back, that assaults and other things that may not rise to the same serious level would also result in movement back for a security concern. So while progression, if there is no, right, because I just want to be very fair on both sides. Like, we are dealing with a population that is particularly violent. We've tried to narrow it as much as possible. So insofar as we are going to commit, and I think we would have done that anyways, to try to do more progression and kind of move that forward, we need a little bit of flexibility on the other side to move back. And not necessarily raise to the same kind of strict criteria that is for placement.
Yeah, that's fine. How does it?
I'm not sure I understand the difference, but
So-
of what you're saying.
The criteria for moving into level 1 right now requires a slashing or a stabbing or a serious injury to an inmate or staff.
Right.
We are more aggressive in trying to move and progress them forward because in the preceding 30 days, they did not actually participate in programming and they did not actually get into any serious assaults. They move on to level 2. Within level 2, there is a moment where they do start a fight and assault someone. It did not result in a serious injury, and yet it persisted, it happened again. We need to move them potentially back into, say, level 1. The criteria, if strictly, seen, the only way to move into level 1 is a slashing or stabbing or a serious. So if we are going to be more aggressive in the progression, we would ask some flexibility in moving placement back. If that makes sense.
This is silent on that, yeah.
This is silent, so you can do that.
Fair enough, but I think that I want to be clear so that when we do come and say, okay, we moved them, we had to move them back, I want it to be clear in everyone's minds that that is something that we may have to do, even in the letter of the placement in level 1. That does not apply.
Right.
Got it.
Yep.
So I think the board should still vote on this. This is basically an existing condition, slightly modified.
Yeah, and we're acknowledging what you're saying, Jeff. The condition is silent on that, as Judge Hamill said, it's silent on that, and we acknowledge what you're saying, and you have that flexibility as a department.
Perino?
Yes.
Bryant?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Hamel?
Yes.
Cohen?
Yes.
Jones, Austin?
Yes.
Motion carries, thank you.
The next condition relates to programming and states the department shall offer 5 hours of programming to each young adult in young adult ESH each day. For young adults enrolled in school, the 5 hours of programming includes 3 hours of school. So you could consider the 3 hours of school as a part of the program, the 5 hours of programming.
You have a comment on that? Perino?
Yes.
Bryant?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Hamel?
Yes.
Cohen?
I vote yes, I just wondered whether the department thought they were doing that now. Yeah. They are.
Jones, Austin?
Yes.
Thank you, carries.
Bobby, are we holding the next one? Okay. By the conclusion, the next condition, by the conclusion of this variance, the department shall provide specialized training to all young adult ESH staff, including the 2-day collaborative training and 1-day overview of dialectical behavior therapy and programming strategies. Do you want to speak to this?
Sure. So I think what we need to do is really give the department some time to actually develop a training for ESH staff because as you know, the actual process has even changed today. So we really need to get a grasp on what we do need to include in this training. So I won't say it's going to be the 2-day collaborative training because the ways in which we work with H&H and True, Second Chance, and Secure are different. The reason why the 2-day training is collaborative is because our other partners also provide training to staff. H&H does not have the same level of involvement in ESH, so we really need to develop what that training will look like for ESH.
And how long do you think it'll take to develop that?
It's November. I would like a reasonable time frame, maybe 60 days, to really talk to different experts, figure out if any of our partners have had a change of heart, if they'd like to assist us in this effort, and really take a look at what needs to be offered for the staff that works here.
Well, I think 60 days is reasonable. I don't know what the board members think. Yeah, I think that's reasonable, so.
For a plan.
For the development of the training. So we need to develop the training, what that training will consist of, and then we can provide the actual time frame for which we will roll it out. So 60 days to develop what the curriculum looks like.
And what would you think a reasonable time would be for implementation once the contours of the...
If we include different partners or different vendors that are not currently in collaboration with the department, it would require a contract. So it all depends on what the actual design of the curriculum looks like.
And if it did require a contract, what kind of time frame are you talking about? I just want to know if this, how long it's going to take. If it's 6 months, if it's 4 months.
Chair, I understand that. I just want to be, I think the problem with several of these last couple of conditions has been that we are unable to quickly here assess the operational impact. For example, from a training, there are 3 separate issues. One, if we do have to design a plan that requires X hours of X training, so it's 24 hours of training. 4 that has to be provided by an outside contractor, 6 has to be provided by our internal staff. That's all math that we would have to do in terms of also pulling people out of and providing space and training officers to kind of do the training. It's hard to answer only because I, on a personal level, don't know what that plan would be. Don't know which components would be required within the training. So in terms of putting together then a plan, we only have limited space as well within our training facilities and limited people who are then qualified to train this. And then secondarily, we have to schedule the people to be off post in a safe way where they can get trained while still fulfilling the staffing requirements for these units. And that's just not to, administratively butcher ourselves to death, but just that's something that don't know how to decide right here and give an answer on some of these issues. And it's why it's hard for us right now when we talk about some of these issues to not just say, okay, yes or no, we're asking for more time because we have to figure out what that actually means.
So with regard to this particular condition, here's where we are then. We're saying 60 days to develop the training, to develop a description of what the training program is going to look like. And then we have an open-ended as to where we go after that in terms of implementation. Is the board okay
Well, we
with
can
that?
give we could give an update at the next board meeting, and then there can be a decision on what an implementation timeline might look like.
At the January meeting, yeah,
Something like
that
that.
would be about
You know,
60 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Okay.
I don't think we voted.
Mr. Perino?
Yes.
Bryant?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Hamel?
Yes.
Cohen?
Yes.
Jones Austin?
Yes.
Yep, motion carries, thank you.
I'm going to go through the last three conditions which relate to reporting as one. That's 20, 21, and 22 in your list. The department shall provide the board, these are existing conditions, by the way. The department shall provide the board with a public report on the implementation of the foregoing conditions. The requirements for this report are outlined in a document titled ESH and Secure Unit Variances. Public reporting condition, dated November 14th, 2017, and available at our website. On at least a monthly basis, the department shall provide the board access to all documentation considered in each young adult ESH placement and review decision for young adults. This includes, but is not limited to, all records reviewed or created by young adult ESH adjudication, health and hospitals placement review, the chief's reviews, the young adult ESH entry unit review committee, and the young adult ESH 45-day periodic review. On a monthly basis, the department shall transmit to the board a list of all young adult ESH placements and reviews. The department shall provide this documentation for each month by the 10th business day of the following month. Documentation for the month this variance expires shall be provided on the 5th day of the following month. By December 28th, 2017, the department shall submit an update to its June 2017 evaluation of enhanced supervision housing for young adults. This update shall focus on outcomes and include progress updates on the issues they and the board identified in the initial report. Those are existing conditions.
I assume those are okay with you?
Again, just seeing as
Subject to the administrative piece.
yeah,
Perino?
probably due to January.
Yes. Bryant?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, it carries.
So there is one last, the department has asked for the variance for 6 months. We've carefully considered a number of conditions. I would move the variance forward with the conditions that have been approved for a 6-month period of time, because in fact the department's going to need time to be able to do all these things, and hopefully we can complete rulemaking by then. So I would, the time period was left open, so I'm recommending it be 6 months.
What do we need?
Vote on the variance with the conditions that were
No, for the entire
approved.
variance. In other words, I'm
No, he's
giving you
asking-
what you're asking.
No, I understand. I just meant because there is a requirement for December 28th specifically to do the report out.
That was what was approved at the last vote also.
So you need
No?
You need to make that in April, actually, because that was for,
No, we don't need that much time so much as, I
you
mean,
don't need that much time?
you can give it to us, but
This is
I'm happy to do it.
outcome.
I just think that we probably need till January again. And I'll be honest, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and other things going on, pulling that together, going into January for a report out on the report would, because this is just a report out on the, like an update on the assessment? No?
The December 28th, yeah, but that was approved in the past, is that correct? Yes. This is an update on your evaluation that you did some months ago about ESH. And it's supposed to look at the outcomes and, yeah.
I don't know where it stands, and so I'm just being honest about that.
So what do you need? You need
I was thinking I needed till January, but I can go back and check with the team and see where they are with the assessment.
That's a current condition now.
Yeah.
The variance is that's been part of the condition all along, so they know that.
That doesn't,
Who wants to?
That's fine.
So-
Okay.
And you want to do it before the January meeting?
I haven't had a chance to confer, so we'll figure it out.
Is that
It is-
okay?
I'm
Well,
okay,
reserve.
yeah. If it, Yeah, I'm okay with it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I gather the sense of the board is that's okay.
by the January meeting, okay.
January.
So we should just, did you vote on those last three conditions?
Yes.
We did.
Oh, okay.
So now what, we vote on the variance with all the conditions?
Yes.
Merciful.
For 6 months.
Right.
For 6 months. Perino?
Yes.
Bryant?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Hamel?
Yes.
Cohen?
Yes.
Jones-Austin?
Yes.
The motion carries.
You vote in favor.
I vote in favor of it. Okay. So now we go to the secure unit variance request.
Yeah, sure. In May 2000, I'm going to just go. Okay. In May 2016, the board first granted variances for minimum standards 1-05B and 108F to allow the department to provide young adults in the secure unit with a minimum lockout time of 10 hours and access to law library services by means of a law library kiosk and typewriter. The board, the department has now asked the board to consider 6-month renewal of the variance allowing for the operation of the secure unit. They have additionally requested that the board consider amending the minimum standards to incorporate this variance permanently as a part of rulemaking. We'll vote on the variance request here today and review permanent incorporation through the rulemaking process. And so if you would just present the request.
Again, we asked for continued variance on the use of the secure unit with its specific lockout requirements. I think that we have shown good faith to the board in trying to judiciously use the secure unit. We have changed the criteria for placement in secure. We have actually maintained kind of our commitment to kind of the individual review for placement in school. We've eliminated the use of desks for kind of other than when there is relevant security issues and concerns. And I think the data has showed in terms of our reporting that we have done that with very 1 or 2 exceptions. So with those considerations, I hope that we can just extend this while we kind of continue to monitor ESH, because that continuum is still something that we need to evaluate who's appropriate where.
And I'd like to thank the department in really figuring out and not using the desk, the restraint desk, and still being able to provide the services. So I want to thank the department. Do we vote on this variance or we introduce the conditions? Because there are conditions.
I think there should be a motion to consider the variance, and then we'll go through conditions and talk.
So a motion to consider? Brian?
So moved.
And seconded.
Second? A second?
Second.
All right. We have a second.
Yes, so now we have debate and/or conditions that people want to propose.
I recommend the conditions from the last variance, the continuation of those conditions.
Okay. I don't really want to, but I can. I can read all of the existing conditions. But there were new ones, mostly from Member Cohen, if you...
Administratively, is there any way to accept all the old conditions and just not
Right,
read
that's
them
what-
all? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
We're obviously agreed to them before. We're happy to agree to them again. I just avoiding the long
continuing.
read.
Yeah. So could we vote on the variance with the continuation of the conditions from the last? So,
I would just suggest first that, and I think administratively, and I'm happy to move all the
conditions.
all the current condition, I would move those forward, but there are a couple of others.
Oh, there
So I
are.
don't think we're ready to just vote on it, but I propose all the current conditions that the Department of Correction has agreed to and has been complying with.
Okay. So, Martha, could you read the new conditions?
I think-
1 and 2.
And 3. I'm going to
You said-
skip over a few here that I
Yes.
think we should just skip over. In fact, there's only one new addition that I think is important, and that relates to the audit that you're currently doing in Secure. The addition here is that during your audit, you specifically look at the number of out-of-cell hours per person, and also that when you're looking at, and that you also report to us and the public on programming hours that are offered to each young adult in Secure, and the number of hours that each young adults participate in programming. That's the only addition that I think is critical here.
The same as the ESH one, we just need time to kind of develop a means by which to collect and report out on that information.
So it's the programming you can't do right, everything else you're doing right now.
Out-of-cell and the programming.
But you're
We're
reporting
doing
on
lockouts, but we're like total out-of-cell calculation.
for 4 days of the month.
Oh, is it an audit?
Yeah.
Oh,
Am I confused? Is this the audit? Okay, this is the audit. Yes, this is the 4 days. This is what you are doing well right now.
number of out-of-cell hours. Though it's still a different calculation, isn't it? I mean, we're just, Emily, help me
We
out.
just, it sounds like
As
we
an
added.
audit, we would do the audit, but it is a different thing that we're trying to calculate. We're not doing just an audit of the lockout times that are afforded to people. It is now a total calculation of 4 days, how many hours are out, which I still think that we need then some time because, again, just operationally administrative, I don't know how, we have to calculate that.
Right, it's in the logbooks that you...
Again, we don't want to just go copying logbooks and then trying to kind of sift through them. We tried to figure out a way where we can actually do it electronically if we can, which I would like a little time to figure out what a solution might be, because it is staff incentive to go through those logbooks.
So should we add the January 15th? Is that, do you need, how much time do you need? Do you need time like we just did for ESH?
Just taking a look at what our IT person can tell me.
15. Yeah?
Yeah, we're doing,
I know the programming can be done in January. I just think the out of cell time, I need to figure that out. I don't have an answer for you. If we can ask for the January, and then if we come to you in January and say, this is what it's going to take to do it, we can't do it right now. If the board is amenable to that, then we'll do what we can.
So you'll add these two, so you'll keep doing the audit that you're doing, and then these two provisions you would try to add in January.
That's right. And
Great.
I'm pretty confident we can do the programming side, because I know we have an existing solution by which to do that. The out-of-cell calculation is a different thing, and I would just have to figure out how to do that.
Any concerns with that? Okay. So report back in January about your ability to add this piece of the audit.
As I said, program is not going to be a problem.
Right.
Out-of-cell
It's
time
just
is a different
out-of-cell.
thing. I just got to figure that out.
Right, so those are all the existing conditions with the minor additions to that audit.
So, Marina?
Yes.
I don't know where we are. Comments?
Thank you so much to our deputy counsel, Casey. Because we were lumping together all the current conditions, it included restraints used in a way that's now inconsistent with enhanced supervision. So I'm just proposing that it be used consistently, and not citing the ABA language that restraints, including restraint dash, shall not be used except to control an incarcerated person immediate risk of self-injury or injury to others, to prevent serious property damage for healthcare purposes, or when necessary as a security precaution during transfer or transport. When restraints are necessary, the department shall use the least restrictive form of restraints that are appropriate and shall use them only as long as the need exists, not for a predetermined period of time. So it's making the use of restraints consistent and secure as it is in enhanced supervision. I'm just assuming you
No,
all
I mean,
have
I
the
just want to
same
make sure,
approach.
because I agree with Heidi, and I have my own kind of personal concern as I'm just trying to figure out exactly what that means. In the secure setting, we have a very clear criteria that we've worked with the board on in terms of placement. We have excluded and not used those desks other than in a school area unless we have credible information or other concerns on the mix of people within that area. If that falls within that, then okay. But because I do not understand completely, because it's written pretty vaguely and it's open a little bit to interpretation, I just want to make sure that we will just utilize and make the consideration for that within the classroom, as we've been doing now, which I think, again, we've tried to prove, we've done it pretty judiciously, we have not used it very often, but when there has been intelligence presented to us, or specific to people who actually have stated animosity toward each other, then we have used it.
So what I would suggest is I think after the meeting, you certainly can meet with the board and perhaps general counsel and deputy counsel to get some interpretation on the application of these. But these are actually highly specific, and they were developed by the American Bar Association, the criminal justice. So I'm not going to say right now because I would need to reflect upon that, but it seems to me that what we're doing in school and secure should be consistent with what we're doing in enhanced supervision. And then offline after the meeting, if you want, we can meet and go over these specifically, how that would be implemented.
I just wanted to also raise, especially with the secure unit, I have a question about whether this exceeds the authority of the board, given the variance that was requested. So we're talking about restraint desks, I understand, but when you start to get into a condition that goes beyond the issue regarding restraint desks, and now you're folding in other use of restraints, I just question whether that is exceeding the scope of the board's authority. And I just put that out there to consider because I'm sure that the board doesn't want to do that. I think we don't want to be worried about challenges, et cetera. So I don't know that that's an issue that we really have to face right now because it is run differently than ESH.
So are you?
So I'm moving that.
You're moving that condition. So we've heard from the department. We have the secure variance with the continuation of all of the conditions from the previous variance with 2 additions, one on restraint, use of restraints, and one about the audit out of cell time that we have given you to January to come back and say what it will take to make that happen. So let's do a vote.
One more thing. You
Any
said the
comment?
audit on out-of-cell time and the audit and the individualized programming data. So
Right.
January. So those are the 2 new things. 3 new things.
Yeah, but Jeff said that the programming wasn't.
We can do it in January, is what he said.
Okay.
Okay.
Rena?
Just a comment before I vote. What the judge is saying is the law, and I believe that's what you're doing already, every single day. So I think maybe it's a wordage that we're missing up on. So we're not violating the law. You're not violating the law, and you do that every day. I mean, if you don't need restraints, you're not going to use them.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean the threat might take a week, might take a day, it might take an hour. But if you feel this person's going to assault another person because of the intel that you have, then you have the right to utilize the restraints. So I just want to make that kind of clear. And with that being said, I'll say yes.
And I agree with that. The way that's worded in the Bureau of Prisons, you could use restraints as long as you can justify it. So we're not saying you can't use restraints. It's just that, and it is within, it's the ACA, American Correctional Association, Bar Association. I don't think it's anything.
And just to be very clear, I don't doubt the purpose of it. I just am very
We're not
particular about it.
restricting. I'm voting yes with the understanding that we are not restricting you and how we're dictating to the board, to the DOC, that if you need to use restraints on an individual, and you can justify it and have the rationale, then I'm definitely okay with it. Because you need to maintain safety and security of the institution. We can't take away your restraints. Just like we can't take away in my opinion, your special housing units, because that's a management tool. And you need a management tool with these violent felons. That's the bottom line. And as was said earlier, it's to maintain the safety and security of the institution. So we're not going to impinge on, I'm not impinging on your use of restraints. If a warden or administrator feels that those restraints need to be used and there's justification, then by all means, use them. So I vote yes.
And I vote yes, and I agree. I think you've already been doing it. You've already shown that you don't want to use restraints, but you will use them if you need to maintain safety. So I vote yes.
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 Okay, all in favor? It passes.
So what was just passed?
The secure variance with all of the previous
Existing
conditions.
and the
plus
ABA.
two new conditions, one to do the audit programming and out of cell, that they will come back to us on January, and one on using the ABA standards for restraint desks. That was applied to ESH.
Thank you for the clarification.
We have another variance.
What is this, a Thanksgiving variance?
Thanksgiving variance.
Yes.
Hopefully this will not engender a huge amount of discussion. So, as happened in years past, the department has requested a variance from minimum standards, excuse me, 1-09C1 small I, sorry, to allow it to conduct Thanksgiving Day visiting on a day schedule rather than an evening schedule. Will someone move that, please?
Moved.
Is there a second? Okay. The purpose of this variance is to encourage family and friends to come to the prison, the jail on Thanksgiving Day to visit their family members. And I have to ask this question: are there any conditions to this? Thank you. Following the rules here. Okay, so there are no conditions. We're going to have a roll call vote on the Thanksgiving variance, next to the Christmas variance in importance to us. So, Mr. Perino?
Yes.
Bryant?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Hamel? Cohen? Jones-Austin?
Yes.
Yeah. In favor? Unanimous. The Thanksgiving variance carries. Okay. Yeah. So we have some informational items that we're going to skip those today, given the lateness of the hour, and we'll now go to the public comment. Let's see here. Same drill, except that you will be limited to 3 minutes this time. Is there a list? Thank you. Okay, Claire O'Brien?
Thank you. My name is Claire O'Brien, and I'm providing this testimony on behalf of the Prisoners' Rights Project. I think we had hoped to hear from the department an update on its new PREA screening and housing. Did I hear that you're skipping that?
Yes.
Okay. So we applaud the board resolution in October finding that the department was not in compliance with certain of the board's PREA rules involving screening and housing of people who are vulnerable to sexual abuse and harassment in custody. We wanted to note that the DOC is also in violation of other board PREA rules, which were not included in the variance request or your resolution, but which should not be ignored. For example, Rule 540D and F require DOC to provide the board with data on each alleged incident of sexual abuse that occurred in the period starting from January 1 to June 30th, 2017. And Director King, this may have been the PREA memos that you referred to in the September meeting. It's not clear whether or not those cover all of the alleged incidents of sexual abuse in that period. So I would love to hear about that when you do the update. Beyond just collecting that information, though, DOC is supposed to conduct a semi-annual assessment of the data to identify problem areas and trends and the corrective action they're taking. These semi-annual assessments are supposed to be signed off by the commissioner and provided to the board and posted on the department's website. The deadline was August 1st of this year, and 3 months later, no report has been posted. The self-assessments matter. Obviously, providing them on the department's website matters because they're the only way the public has any means of finding out what is actually going on in city jails. From the reports we've received from clients and from the limited data that the department has provided for calendar year 2016, sexual abuse continues at record rates in New York City jails. Investigations are, rarely completed. I think more than 90% are pending on a regular basis. And incarcerated persons' allegations are rarely credited. The public has a right to know just how bad things are and what the department is or isn't doing about it. The department is in clear violation. If the department is in clear violation of a rule, as they are here, we ask the board to hold them accountable and to make issue a comprehensive resolution addressing all known violations and their remedial actions. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Al Craig. Not here. The next speaker is Victoria Phillips.
My name is Victoria Phillips. I work at the Urban Justice Center Mental Health Project as a community health and justice organizer, and I'm an active member of the Jails Action Coalition. I want to touch on several things. 3 years ago, I went on a record speaking to this board, and I started telling you all how I witnessed certain things that occurred while working on Rikers. One of the things I mentioned one of the first times that I actually went on a record was how I witnessed officers tell somebody, oh, you can't go to the bathroom right now, or shit on yourselves. And yet 3 years later, I'm hearing the same type of things still occurring. And today you've been given direct testimony from people that have actually been put through this type of torture, and it is a torture. Jeff, sorry, I'm gonna call you out by your name. Jeff actually stood up here today and mentioned how officers are being trained in the units that we all discussed today for DBT. So I would ask the board to actually ask Jeff or DOC how many officers have actually been trained currently today in DBT. One of my colleagues came up here today and he started to give a testimony of someone who is currently in OBCC. And I just want to point out to the board, because Pinero, you gave a beautiful speech on, a lovely speech on unity, solutions, and mutual respect. Yet when my colleague started his speech of direct words from somebody currently in OBCC, you and Dr. Bryant was keying and didn't even give the respect to hear the words that were being spoken at that time. So when you speak of unity and us working together, I really want you to understand what that truly means. And working together means actively listening to people that stand before you with the words of people that are unseen and unheard. Dr. Bryant, I've mentioned before and reminded you and this board that people, about 80%, 85% of the people in Rikers have not been convicted of their crimes, or their alleged crimes. Yet today, you sat up here and called them violent felons. The wording, the mindset, if we're going to bring about true change, it starts here, it starts at home, it starts with the oversight, and then it trickles down. Jeff went on the record and he commented that he had no data on the injuries from shackles. The question was presented to the DOC, have you seen or heard, have any data on injuries? He then turned to DOC staff, and I want to make it known on the record, about $1 million, if not more, people in salary sat here, and no one could give him an answer on whether or not they've witnessed anyone with injuries from shackles. Yet Dr. Cohen, in one of his statements, said he physically saw someone have injuries on their ankles from shackles. So when we talk about mutual respect and working towards solutions, we have to be realistic. And I'm not against DOC. I actually took tests years ago to work for DOC until I actually worked on Rikers, and then I said I can't be a part of a gang.
Ms. Phillips, your time is up.
No, it's not. So I will finish with saying that there are actually good people in DOC, and I believe some in the administration believe when they say changes are going to occur. But for the board and all others to think for a second that everything that's stated here or in the rules actually trickles down to the forefront or the front lines is asinine. And if we're really going to make change, we need to start at home, and we need to hold each other accountable and not just continue to give the DOC opportunities to come back and tell us what they have not done or they cannot do or what they cannot produce with results. Peace and blessings.
Thank you very much. I think this does it. We have a meeting, next meeting is January 9th?
Second Tuesday of the month.
Second Tuesday of the month. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.